Okay, Senator Kavanaugh.
Yes.
It appears we're okay now, but I mean, can I ask you to start your testimony over, please?
Is it that good?
Yes, it was that good.
It was so good, it's worth repeating, Kavanaugh.
Okay.
I apologize.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Again, my name is Kevin Kavanaugh, Senator from District 16, representing the towns of Bow, Candia, Dunbarton, Hooksett, and Manchester wards 1, 2, and 12. And I come before you today to introduce Senate Bill 119. It's an act relative to the ordinary death benefit in the retirement system. Death is always around us, and we all try to evade it, and some of us confront it too early in life. And this bill is really meant to correct a clerical matter to make sure families of those working on the front lines of our communities are given their earned benefit. In recent years, we have seen educators, firefighters, police officers die before they are able to complete paperwork to designate a retirement beneficiary in the event of their untimely death. If not for this paperwork issue, the spouse or child of the late teacher, firefighter, or cop would be afforded the benefit to which their family was invested in the New Hampshire retirement system. And I want to be clear, this bill is not to expand a benefit. This bill is not to reward additional monies beyond what the New Hampshire retirement system has calculated by statute as the beneficiary's earned retirement. This bill does not touch line of duty death benefits, which are in other statutes, and the result of any result of work-related death. We, the legislature, have defined vested status for many years. If life got in the way of a public employee and an employee did not go to Concord to complete this paperwork, their family would be punished. And it wouldn't be the employee, and that just isn't right. This bill just aims to fix that issue. If I were an active teacher in this situation and killed in a car accident today, this bill would ensure that my retirement was passed on to my next of kin. On behalf of the families past, current, and future, I urge your full favorable consideration for this bill, and I'll take any questions this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Questions from the committee? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. I have a question on lines 2 and 3 of the bill. It scratches out or was eligible for service retirement. Can you tell us what the purpose of that is?
Well, if anything they built for their service retirement, that would just be transferred over to the family or next of kin.
Follow up?
Follow up.
So it deletes that portion of the law, though?
I wouldn't say it deletes, it kind of adds to it that they just definitely get that that benefit.
Follow up.
Follow up.
Sorry, the version I have, it has a line that scratches it out. So I believe that deletes it. I was just wondering why that's being deleted.
I'd have
Maybe
to
I
get
don't
back
have-
to you on it then, really. I have to
Okay.
get back to you and pull it up. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Kavanaugh, can you explain the circumstances that would lead to this provision being necessary? In other words, I think I heard you say that someone was on their way home, having just reached the point at which they're eligible for benefits and haven't done the paperwork, and they suffered an untimely demise at that point before finishing the paperwork, that this would then provide the spouse with the max benefit that they would have had earned equivalent to that benefit at the point of their death. Is that correct?
That is correct. What that does is more of a hypothetical if that happened. I wasn't trying to get into any kind of specific case. So if myself, hypothetically, as an educator, and I had 25 years and didn't fill out that paperwork, my spouse would get 50% of the benefit that I would be entitled to if I did fill out that paperwork. And this just eliminates that need to fill out the paperwork and still get the full benefit that you would have if you did fill out the paperwork.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. I have a question about the language on line 9. Is there a difference between what the surviving spouse would receive if the member had retired immediately prior to death versus a month before or a year before? My question's about the retired immediately prior to death. How does that change what the surviving spouse would qualify for?
Well, there would be, there wouldn't be an increase is the point of that, saying, so what if the day I died, whatever my max benefit would be, that would be it. It wouldn't be an increase from, for any extension going forward, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Follow up, please.
Follow up?
So why do we need the language that says immediately prior to death? Or is the fact that the member was retired what makes the change in the survivor's benefit?
I wouldn't be opposed to any amendment of that, but I wouldn't want to change. There wouldn't be a change to the survivor benefit. It would just be what was accrued upon the day of the passing, I guess, if they were still active.
Further questions from the committee?
If I-
Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Kevin, not to confuse the issue, but how many times has it occurred that the paperwork hasn't been processed to designate a recipient in lieu of, or as a result of your demise, your death? Do you think this is a frequent occurrence or just an oversight on the part of an individual that they hadn't done this in preparing for this situation?
I think it would just be an oversight in the individual. Just, I mean, like I said, you're going about your everyday life and you forget to fill out that paperwork, and it's something that your spouse or your family pays for the rest of the
Right.
time they're collecting. Right.
And further question, Mr. Chairman?
Follow up?
My follow-up, Kevin, is we understand, particularly in the realm of police and fire, how dangerous the job is and how many unfortunate incidences have taken place. For example, an individual taking their own life and the spouse is left hanging if this information hadn't been filled out, if this paperwork hadn't been filled out, and as a result of that, the family member is left with 50% based on the current situation. Is that true? Is that correct? Is that how it's done now?
That's correct. In any kind of situation where there's a loss of life like that, if that wasn't filled out, there would be 50% of what that employee was entitled to if they had filled out the paperwork.
And further question, Mr. Chairman?
Further question?
And as a result of that, the remaining family not only suffers over the loss, but also suffers financially because they're not receiving the benefit that they were entitled to. Correct?
That's correct.
And just one other point, Mr. Chairman, if I might. And the fact of the matter is that because of the pressure that's been say put on people who serve in the Group 2 retirement system, we've seen a lot of tragedies over the past few years. And if this situation were not corrected, other people would have suffered significantly. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Kavanaugh, I think I hit the wrong button here. Can you quantify in some way the difference between the 50% benefit and the maximum benefit in a typical example?
I appreciate that, Senator. I think that's something I have to pass over to the retirement system. I mean, it's just the individual of where they were in their service and what the calculation would be so varied. Even I probably depend on, of course, age and the amount of service in. Are you looking for an average, I guess, or it's?
I'm just trying to see is how big of a difference is there between the 50% and the retirement that they would have earned?
Yeah, I guess that would probably have to go to the retirement system, but it would just be depending on what the benefit, what the amount of the benefit would be for that individual.
All right, so follow up.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So does this situation occur because a firefighter has not filled out paperwork? Is that what we're hearing?
That's correct, right? They have to fill that out. If they don't fill that out and they pass, unfortunately, or suddenly, if that paperwork is not filled out, it reduces to 50% of what they were entitled to.
Further questions from the committee? Senator Morse.
Yeah, Senator, I know you said there's nothing different between how this would be handled, but there's an FN attached to this that looks to be about $2 million a year, starting in '24. So I guess I'm trying to understand why the increase if it's not doing anything different.
I mean, honestly, I was surprised at that number as well. And I just, I don't know everything about actuarial analysts, but I know they always look at when people die and the percentage of people that will. And it just, I guess would have to look at that, see how many people, or they base that, they're kind of looking at that number. They're basing the amount of people that will forget to fill that out. It just, I guess my point is, if it's that big, it seems like there's quite a few people that are not filling that out if they're only getting 50% of what they would be entitled to.
Follow up.
Gary, is there someone coming on from retirement?
I'm saying.
Marty
yes.
Carlin, yeah.
Yes.
I'm all set.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? I do have one, Senator Kavanaugh. Why aren't employees required to fill out this paperwork when they start work?
It's funny with that. That seems like a simple answer. I guess they have to do that when the benefit, I think it's 20-year mark when they have to fill it out. But I think that would be another easy fix too, if they would have to fill that out right away.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Our next speaker I'll bring in is Arthur Beaudry.
Can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Arthur Beaudry. I represent the New Hampshire State Permanent Firefighters Retirement Association, and I'm here today to speak in favor of Senate Bill 119. I would like to give the committee a little background on myself. I'm a retired captain from the Manchester Fire Department, and I was a trustee of the New Hampshire Retirement System Board of Trustees from 1988 to 2001. First and foremost, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Senator Kavanaugh for sponsoring this bill on behalf of the New Hampshire State Permanent Firefighters Retirement Association. Some of you may or may not know that that the City of Manchester Fire Department recently had two very tragic incidents happening in the department. Sadly, two firefighters had taken their own life within months of each other. It was due to those tragic losses that the language changes you see in this bill came to realization. Under the current law, if a member had not signed the pre-option beneficiary paperwork when they attain the age and years of service, making them eligible for service retirement, this member's spouse would lose 50% of the member's service retirement if the death were to occur before the member's retirement. And this goes on to the question that one of the senators had asked on line 9. Why is that language prior to the member's retirement immediately prior to death? So if I was a firefighter and I had 30 years of service, I would be eligible for a pension of 75% of my average final earnings. If I were to die prior to going up and signing that paperwork, my spouse would only receive 50% of that benefit. Or 50%. So they would, he or she would lose out on 25% of the earned benefit that member had earned. A member could be driving to Concord to sign his or her paperwork and get in an accident, get killed, and their spouse would lose out on half of the member's earned pension benefit. The new language will allow the member's spouse to receive the maximum pension benefit allowable that he or she would receive prior to the member's death. The spouse of a deceased member should not be punished due to the member's untimely death. The fiscal note on this bill is due to the fact that the retirement system actually makes out and it benefits by those individuals that don't go up to the retirement system and sign their pre-option forms. I don't believe that the statute was designed to have the retirement system benefit from a tragic loss of one of its members. The cost of this legislation should be going to the grieving spouse and not to the New Hampshire retirement system. I ask that the committee please pass this legislation so that the untimely death of a New Hampshire retirement system member will not put an undue hardship on the member's family. I want to thank you, and I will answer any questions. And one other comment I would make, the question that was asked about line 2, why is that language lined out? Because that language is lined out because it relates to line 4, equal to 50% of the service retirement. What we did is in the new language, puts it so that the member will get the maximum payable allowance for that member. So that's why the top part is lined out. And again, I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Beaudry. Questions from the committee? I do have one. Senator Kavanaugh had testified this does not expand the benefit, but by virtue of the fact that you're going from 50% to a maximum benefit and seeing somewhere around a $1.9 million effect on, how can that not expand benefits?
Well, committee, Senator Kavanaugh is correct. It's not expanding a benefit. What it's doing is allowing the member's spouse to collect the benefit that his or her spouse has accrued. What this does is actually it's a detriment. The old language is a detriment to that individual, because if they don't sign the paperwork, that's what I said, the system actually makes out on those people that don't sign that paperwork. They save that additional dollars that they would be paying that spouse that they were eligible for. If I were to retire, I could collect that money, but seeing I died before I signed that paperwork, my spouse loses out. And I can tell you that we've had at least 2 that I specifically know of in Manchester. One gentleman died, his paperwork was in his desk drawer, and he passed away of a heart attack at home. And his paperwork was not filled out because it was in his drawer at work. And there was another gentleman that he was on his deathbed, and we went and had him sign the paperwork so that his spouse was going to be eligible for the benefit prior to his demise. So these are real things that have happened, and I was part of, so I know firsthand that this is real. And it isn't an additional benefit. It's just giving the spouse the benefit that his or her spouse what's the word I'm looking for? Earned during their time of employment.
Thank you. Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beaudry, is this something that could be handled when a person is hired? As I was in an agency shop for 31 years as a pilot. And when we checked to board the company, our union put the paperwork in front of us that day. Okay. And I'm not sure that we need to be making a law when a simple matter of the union doing its job or the employer in a non-union fire department requiring filling out the paperwork the day they get hired would take care of it.
I believe, and again, if Marty Collin is there, he could answer this question, but my understanding, this is a legislative rule. It's not a union rule or something on employment. You have to attain the years and age of service before you can sign this paperwork. You can't sign it when you first get on a job, hoping that you're going to make, 20 years and age 45, or under the current law, 25 years and age 52 and a half. Those are the for group 2, those are the triggers to have this paperwork signed. You have to accomplish the years of service and the age before you can sign this form.
Follow up?
Follow up.
I would disagree, sir. I would say that it would be much easier to change a form so that it's applicable to whatever benefit accrues at any point, up to and including the point at which they're eligible. Again, I'm reluctant to change the law when a simple paperwork exercise would do the job. Thank you.
If I may, if it's a simple administrative rule for the retirement system, we would definitely support it, but I don't believe it is. And I think Mr. Collin would be able to give the answers to that. But I agree. If it's just that simple, Senator, we would definitely support it. We just don't want these spouses to lose out because of an untimely death of their spouse or a member of the system.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Beaudry.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dennis Corrigan.
Good afternoon, Dennis. You should be live now. Dennis, are you there? Can you raise your hand if you can hear us? Okay. So he can hear us, but we can't hear him.
He is unmuted. Would you like me to bring him back later to try again after some other folks
Yes,
speak?
if you could do that, please, and we'll continue on.
Sure.
May have to call in.
Okay. Our next speaker is Brian Rill.
Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon on Senate Bill 119. I did with some written testimony, so I'm going to mark short. For the record, my name is Brian Rill, and I serve as the president of the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire. And as a member of the New Hampshire Retirement Security Coalition, I am testifying in support of Senate Bill 119 relative to the death benefit in the retirement system. The Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire is a state association that represents 2 local unions and approximately 2,000 active and professional firefighters and paramedics throughout New Hampshire. It's our responsibility to advocate firefighters and their families throughout this great state, and that's why I am testifying for you today. I'm not going to repeat the remarks discussing the pre-selection form. I believe that there was some good testimony in regards to that, and I agree with everything that Senator Kavanaugh had to say in regards to that pre-selection form and the process behind that. I just want to reiterate the fact that this bill is not aiming to make any drastic changes to the retirement system, but rather provides the benefit that has already been earned by the members and their families. And this is critical when we consider some of the sweeping changes that were made to the system a few years back. This does is it ensures that firefighters are able to support themselves and their families through their retirement. And oftentimes our members now, due to the changes in 2011, have to work for approximately 5 to 15 years longer into their careers to receive the benefit that they would have prior to the changes. Which means they'll likely reach the age and years of service requirement, but will need to continue to work additional years. And for many, this isn't an option. Senate Bill 119 effectively eliminates that pre-selection process and ensures that every member's beneficiary receives that benefit that was earned, and nothing more, nothing less. I respect this, and I understand it's you're tasked with looking at the financial implications of this. I'd just like to reinforce the fact that I agree with the fact that I don't believe that this is a new benefit. Simply, it is allowing a member's family to receive the benefit that they should have earned. And I think that that's extremely important when you look at the public servants throughout the state of New Hampshire. So on behalf of the firefighters of New Hampshire and their families, I respectfully ask this committee to support Senate Bill 119. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you, Mr. Ill. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. You as well.
The next speaker is Marty Carlin from the New Hampshire Retirement System.
Good
Thank
afternoon,
you.
Marty.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Thank you, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marty Carlin, and I'm with the New Hampshire Retirement System. NHRS does not have a position on the bill. However, I signed up to testify for informational purposes. If the committee allows, I can sort of run down the current explanation of how the in-service death benefits work, which will answer some of the questions you had earlier, and then make some brief comments on how this House Senate Bill 119 would modify them.
okay, if you could do that, it may answer some of the questions that have come up.
Okay, so when a member dies in service, which means they're an active member of the retirement system, there are two types of death benefits in the statute. One is accidental death, which is a job-related death, and Senate Bill 119 does not address that section. And the second is referred to as ordinary death, and that's a non-job related death. So, again, the car accident or any type of accident, illness that's not related to the job. In both, the big difference between accidental, the job related death, and the non-job related is if somebody was to die as a result of their job, there's a 50% of the member's current annual salary paid to a spouse, regardless of if they have 1 year in on the job or even less. So that could happen at any time. The ordinary death is reserved for members who are vested or eligible for retirement. So in other words, the ordinary death, you have to have at least 10 years of service to become vested, or if you're a certain age, you're eligible for service retirement. So there is no pension benefit paid for a non-job related death unless it is for somebody with 10 or more years of service. Under the current law, the spouse of someone who has more than 10 years or is eligible for service retirement, it's 50% of what the pension would have been, had the person, gone on to collect it. The spouse also has the option of taking a refund of the accumulated contributions contributed by the member plus interest and a cash payment equal to 1 year's salary. So the spouse has options in this point. Essentially what happens is, and that's the way it works. So with this bill, it bifurcates 10 years of service and eligible for service retirement and creates a different automatic benefit in those cases. So somebody with 10 years of service who has a non-job related death, their spouse would still continue to get, 50% of, what the pension would have been. So this could be somebody who was, 45 years old, had, more than 10 years in the system, was nowhere close to retirement, and that spouse would get a 50% benefit, or the option of the lump sum payment. If a member is eligible for service retirement, that spouse would get 100% of what the pension would have been, for the member, had they retired on, the day they died, type of thing. So that's basically taking account all the service and salary of that member, prior to the death. And to be eligible for service retirement, in Group 1, you need to either be age 60 if you were hired before July 1st of 2011, or age 65 if you were hired after that date. And in Group 2, it ties back into that years of service and age. So the vested members in Group 2 it can be as early as age 45 with more than 20 years, you're eligible for service retirement at that point. And then for the hires after 7-1 of 11 in Group 1, the minimum is a minimum age of 52 and a half with at least 25 years of service, and then you're eligible for service retirement. So there's some differences there. The paperwork issue that it was spoken to earlier in the presentation, it's a form called pre-selection of a survivorship option. So the death benefits that I just spoke about are automatic in statute, and they're payable, to a married member, to the spouse of a married member who dies in service. The pre-selection is essentially, it's a proxy for the retirement application. On the retirement application, when you fill out, what's considered, the retirement paperwork, and you have a choice to leave a survivorship option, some or all of your pension, to a beneficiary, or you can choose what's called the maximum option, and that's how we calculate the benefit, and that benefit stops when the retiree passes away. Or they can leave a survivorship option where they're leaving some percentage of their pension to an individual, doesn't have to be a spouse, and there's a reduction because you're basically insuring on 2 lives for a survivorship option. So if somebody filed their retirement application, and they're going to retire in 2 months, and something were to happen to them, we would look to the retirement application for what survivor benefit, because there's an application on file. But not everybody retires. In fact, most people don't retire as soon as they're eligible. In Group 2, people retire probably in their early 50s. The employees and teachers that wait till they're 62 or 63. So they're basically eligible for retirement and continuing to work. So for those folks, the pre-selection form, I'm not really sure exactly, when it came into effect, but it serves as like a proxy for the retirement application. So if you're eligible to retire, you can fill out a pre-selection form and designate a beneficiary to receive 100% of your pension, if you pass away while you're still working. Okay, and that's not an automatic benefit. That's something the member has to fill out, and we can't receive it and accept it until they're eligible for service retirement. So it's a 1-page form. The only caveat to that is the beneficiary on the pre-selection needs to match the active beneficiary form. You can't have separate beneficiaries. So we tell people about this, in our member education presentations and on the website, but there's probably a cohort of people who don't know that this benefit exists. You don't have to physically come up to Concord to submit this paper. You can submit a notarized form by US mail, email, drop off, fax, what have you. But once we have that form on file, if the service retirement eligible member dies, under any circumstance before retirement, 100% of the pension or the maximum amount would go to the designated beneficiary. So this bill, Senate Bill 119, makes that automatic 100% maximum option available for spouses only in the case, of a death in service of a member that wasn't job related. In terms of the fiscal note, because the only automatic benefit is the 50% pension, to the extent that the maximum amount, the 100% is paid out to more people, there'll be an actuarial cost, based on life expectancy tables and when folks die in past history, that, the actuary assumes there'll be a few hundred in-service deaths every year. Not all of them will be retirement eligible, but there will be more than one might think. I was surprised at the number. And of the cost on the fiscal note, about 80% of that, $2 million a year, is to sort of back fund for all the members in the system now who this benefit wasn't funded for, over the course of their work experience. So that 80% of that cost would go away in 20 years under the layered amortization, and then you'd be left with just the normal cost going forward for that. I hope I didn't confuse things more with my lengthy testimony, but I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Mr. Collin. Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I actually have a couple of questions. Mr. Carlin, can you explain to us why you can't get someone to pre-select sooner? Is it because they might be divorced and remarry and have a different spouse than when they originally took the job or when they first became vested? I'm confused about why you have to wait until they're eligible for retirement. That's my first question.
The pre-selection form was sort of, vetted and set up at least a decade before I joined the retirement system. It's been around for quite some time, so I'm a little spotty on the exact rationale at the time. But if you think of the pre-selection form as sort of a mini retirement application, a proxy for that, then you need to be eligible for service retirement, to apply for service retirement. So that's the way we treat that. Before the form was created, people would and did and could basically file an application, and then pull it back every month and just, extend their retirement date, basically to get the same, benefit, to protect that spouse or beneficiary for a larger pension benefit. That's called refiling, and that was a fairly common practice. People who aren't eligible for service retirement or in their 50s still do it to some extent. So the pre-selection form locks it in. And in terms of a question about divorce or changing their mind, if a new pre-selection form was submitted, and notarized, it would supersede whatever we had on file. And on top of that, that pre-selection form is only in effect until we receive the retirement application. Then that becomes sort of the active document, for if anything were to happen to the member before the pension started.
And if I could follow up, please.
Follow up.
Thank you. So the fact that you've got this form and it's changed some time ago, does that mean, as Senator Gaida asked, that your process could be changed without legislation?
I would have to refer back to our legal on that and research that for you. I don't know. I think if my thinking is if the retirement system felt it could take it at any time, it would have, when they created the form. But I can get you the legal backing on that as a follow-up to the committee.
Thank you. And one final, are you telling us that the actuarial projections are based on a certain number of people being eligible for retirement, but still working and not filling out that form? Is that why there's cost? Or
Yes. That's generally speaking. There's some other sort of actuarial magic filtered into that as well, but that's the general idea, is that more people would get the maximum benefit than are now, because not everybody fills out a pre-selection form. Again, that's something we try to make members aware of and encourage them to consider it. But life gets in the way, and a lot of people don't get around to it or forget about it or aren't aware of it at all.
Thank you.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marty, could it be done in a way that when the person first hires on, they sign a form that says they want their spouse or whoever it is at the time of their demise to get the maximum benefit? Because I understand that the pre-selection piece is the one that they use to determine the actual amount of the benefit. So I see this as potentially two issues. One is saying, I want my spouse to get whatever I'm entitled to, and put that on record. And then when you're eligible to retire, you fill out the pre-selection form that gives the exact amount. And in that way, we wouldn't have to legislate this, and we could solve the problem administratively.
Well, when somebody is hired, we instruct and encourage individual employers to have them fill out an NHRS beneficiary form, as part of that pile of paperwork you get on day one. And most people, employers are very good about that. And most people have a beneficiary on file, as soon as they're hired. And in the statute now, the way the death benefits work, there are different death benefits for a non-spouse beneficiary versus a spouse beneficiary. There's differences in what's paid between an accidental job-related death and a non-job related death. So there's no way to know what the benefit is. It's going to depend on the type of death and when in the person's career, the death occurred. So they do have a beneficiary on file, and then whatever the statute calls for, at the time, so it still focuses back on the statute. So I don't believe we could make a preemptive designation. And I will say, just even if someone dies a non-job related death, the beneficiary is always going to get the money that the member put back regardless of when they pass away.
Thank you.
Senator Morse, has your question been answered?
Yes.
Okay. Any other further questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me that all of this falls into the point of contact when a person signs on. When a person signs on, what's the orientation like as it relates to the let's call it the benefit, years of service, et cetera. And indeed, if you buy an insurance policy, and I'm equating this to an insurance policy, you assign the beneficiaries the day you engage in that policy. Why is this so different? Why is this process so different? And indeed, if it is so different, how many people are involved in not designating the recipient of their pension if indeed they pass unexpectedly?
We have some, but not many cases where no one's even filled out a straight up beneficiary form, and then it goes to probate with the person's estate. But most of our members have a beneficiary form on file, and that's also something that is changeable throughout their career. As long as they have yet to retire, they could fill out a different beneficiary form every week, for 30 years and send it in. And as long as it's, signed and notarized, they can update their beneficiary as life changes, family, et cetera, happen. So most of our members do. And I can't speak to the onboarding for all of our, 450 plus employers. I mean, we message that in our presentations. We have some, we've always for decades have had handouts, about the benefits and things like that, we would send to the employers to give to new hires. Now with the internet, we have videos and other things as well. So we take every opportunity to make sure people know that they should have a beneficiary on file, and if there are death benefits payable, in several cases through NHRS. But it's hard to, short of knocking on 48,000 doors around the state, it's hard to make sure everybody knows everything they're entitled to.
Just one further question, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Okay, so but indeed, with something that's so significant in terms of your work span, your lifespan, and what's going to happen afterwards, isn't it incumbent upon somebody to make sure that this paperwork has been taken care of, so you don't fall into a situation as has been testified to by former firefighter Beaudry and Senator Kavanaugh in their iteration?
I can say that we do as much as we think we can, as much as we can think of to make people aware of, that the pre-selection exists as an option, and how to access it and fill it out. There could be other things that could be done, that would require some logistics and some costs. But I mean, we do as much as there's nothing we're not doing. We don't think NHRS, gains or loses. I mean, our goal is to make sure every retiree or beneficiary gets the benefit that they're entitled to, no less and no more. And that's our goal in everything we do. So there's no incentive for us to hide the ball on this. But believe me, Senator, we want people to know about this. When we do the presentations, I always refer to it as, it sounds too good to be true, but it is. if you're eligible for service retirement, take this form home and fill it out. And
Okay. Thank you, Marty, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Kirsten, we were able to get I'm sorry.
Senator Hennessy.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question regarding the form. For those who fill out the form when they're retiring eligible age, and something changes on that form, say they remarry or like just a life event changes, what happens if the information on that form is not correct? Does the money not go to anyone?
It would go to the person named on the form. So that's another thing. I mean, they can update it at any time, but if it's not updated, it will essentially go to the person they may not have intended to at the time they passed away. We've had sort of sad incidences, over the years where, it was somebody's girlfriend, but they married somebody else years later, never updated the beneficiary, things like that. I mean, again, they don't happen, but we have to pay any benefit to the person named on the form. So, that's very important to make sure that's up to date.
What if that's a deceased spouse?
It would for lifetime pension benefits, you can choose any one person. It doesn't have to be a spouse on the beneficiary form. It needs to be an individual. It can't be a trust or anything like that. Or you can designate multiple beneficiaries to a percentage of your pension. If you had 3 kids and you wanted to do 33% each, type of thing. And then there's also a form for contingent beneficiary. So if your named beneficiary passes away, and there's any money, any contributions in your account that haven't been paid out yet, that lump sum would go to the contingent beneficiaries. You can't have a contingent person get a pension, but if they have the contingent beneficiary set up, or if they have a trust, the lump sum would be paid to whoever the next person in line would be for anything that's left.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Carlin.
Thank you. And I'll get that legal information on the pre-selection to the committee as soon as I can get it.
Appreciate that. Kirsten, were we able to get Mr. Corrigan back?
We can attempt to communicate with him, see how it goes here. Mr. Corrigan?
Okay, are you on now, Mr. Corrigan? Again, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Can you call in by phone?
I suggested that before.
Maybe an issue with his microphone. He can try to call in by phone. If anybody else this time would like to speak, please virtually raise your hand and we will call on you. And we're not able to hear from Mr. Corrigan, and I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. All right. I will state that Mr. Corrigan had signed up opposed to the bill. I guess at this time, though, unfortunately, we'll have to let that go, and we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 119 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 118, recognizing its sponsor, Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. For the record, I'm Senator Lou D'Alessandro. I represent District 20, Manchester Wards 3, 4, 10, 11 in the town of Goffstown. I come before you as the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 118 FN, a local, relative to the Property Tax Relief Act of 2021. This bill makes an appropriation to the state treasurer for the purpose of providing municipal aid grants to each city, town, and unincorporated place in the state by October 1st of the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. At least 60% of the grant received by the municipality shall be used for local property tax reduction. In the last operating budget, we appropriated, out of the goodness of our budget, $20 million a year to municipalities, specifically to do whatever they wanted to do with that money. There were no strings attached to that. And one would have thought that one of the main purposes of doing this was to go back to the old revenue sharing days, and that the money would be used to abate some property taxes, not to provide property tax relief, because we all hear time after time after time that the burden that's brought to the local communities manifests itself in property taxes. 60% of this money would be used for property tax relief. And I think we're all in favor of that. A number of years ago, municipal aid was discontinued. Municipal aid had been in place for a long period of time. It was as a result of a deal that was made when the old inventory tax, the stock and trade tax, was repealed and replaced by the business profits tax. And as a result of that, revenue sharing would have taken place as part of this transaction, as part of this deal. Well, over the years, municipal aid had been discontinued. We saw an opportunity to provide aid in the last operating budget. And yet we have heard, both in our Ways and Means Committee, that one of the problems facing communities is property taxes. And we gave 20 million to be used by the communities any way they wanted, and they could have used it to help abate property taxes. This piece of legislation specifically says that 60% of the money will be used to affect property taxes. And indeed, that's a cry that we hear year after year after year from our local communities, particularly during the budget process. Well, this is an opportunity to address those concerns that I say are manifested year after year after year. We had 20 million each year last year in the budget. First time that had happened in a long period of time. And this continues that process, but qualifies it in saying specifically that 60% of the money would be used to abate property taxes or to provide property tax relief. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll address any questions from the body. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this before the committee, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions from the committee? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Alessandro, can the state appropriate funds to a community and then dictate that the community use it for tax relief, as opposed to for specific projects like the roads, the highway funds that we commit to the towns, or other things? I'm wondering about the constitutionality of it. Sincerely, I understand the rationale, but I'm wondering, can we in fact tell them you must use this to lower taxes? Is that not up to a local, the decision of the local legislative body?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the question, and I always appreciate your kind comments, Senator Gaida. I think the purpose of a public body, when it makes an appropriation and it designates that appropriation, it's as a result of the comments made by the community and the need manifested by the community. And we hear all the time, local property taxes have to be dealt with, and we need money to work lowering property taxes. So this is a direct result of those questions or those comments that come year after year after year. Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, and I can't tell you, but when we give bridge aid, we give it specifically to take care of bridges. When we give road aid, we give it specifically to take care of roads. So I think there is a precedent of assigning dollars and saying that these dollars should be spent on certain issues. I think we've got a legislative history of that. That's the best I can do at this point in time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Rosenwald, did you have a question?
Thank you. I've been probably like all of us, kind of lying there at night with millions of dollars running around in my head. And there are a lot of bills this year that would attempt to send money from the state down to communities. One is mine, one is from Senator Ricciardi. Senator Hennessy has one coming up, I think right after this. This is the only one I'm aware of that actually would require property tax relief. And my question is that your sense too, from looking at the bills before us?
Thank you, Senator Roswell. Thank you for the question. Yes, I believe that that's the case. Of all of the bills that I have seen at this point in time, it seems to me that this specifically designates money for that purpose, lowering the property tax.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Senator, of the $20 million that was distributed in the last term, how much of that was used to lower property taxes?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And thank you very much for the question, Senator. Every local municipality had the option to lower property taxes if they had that desire. I haven't gone through all of them and asked what they did with the money. We could do a survey and find out what they did with the money, but I'm sure some of them used it to lower property taxes. Others found other uses for the money. And the intention of the bill last time, or the intention of the municipal aid last time, was to give it to communities to do what they thought the most need was at that point in time.
And I have one more. Why, since my constituents in District 11 have no control over the taxes that you raised in your district, why should my constituents pay for something that could be out of control when we try to keep it in control?
I'm a little frazzled by the question, but thank you for it. Let me try to figure it out. I think what I've tried to do with this piece of legislation is address the public need as manifested by the public time after time after time. And the state has a commitment to do that. And the way to do that, to address that, in my opinion, is through this municipal aid. And as I said, the real request from people is lower my property taxes or have an effect on my property taxes. And this does that. That's the best answer that I can give you, Senator. Thank you for the question. I think it's an interesting one. And as a public entity, I think that's my response. That my response is what we hear from constituents is perceived in the public good or in the public interest, and that's what my reaction was to.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator D, I have a question for you on the 20%, 80%. So we have a bill we're going to hear next, 135, and we're going to discuss how some of the school districts have not been able to get their free and reduced lunch forms turned in this year. Well, some of them may have been able to get them turned in, but for those who have not been able to return their forms this year, I feel as if even though you intended for these districts or these towns to receive 80% of this funds proportionally, some of them may be disadvantaged because they haven't had their free and reduced lunch forms turned in this year. Have you thought about which year this would pertain to, or thought about the consequence of that?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for again your point about free and reduced, because as you know, I sponsored the school lunch bill in 1973, You were a young child at that time, I know.
I was not born then.
You weren't born. Well, at that point, I sponsored the school lunch program for the state of New Hampshire, and we were the 5th state in the United States to follow the great Hubert Horatio Humphrey's commitment to feeding school children. Your point's well taken. This money would be allocated for the next 2 years, because in this year that 20 million has already been given to the municipalities, and they're using it as they see fit. With regard to the school lunch program, we've got to figure a way to go back and look at maybe the ADM and those who signed up prior to COVID coming into place, because after COVID, everybody was able to get lunch, and those people who signed up in the past failed to sign up. So the whole thing's out of whack now, and we have to deal with that as we move forward. And I understand your concern. I think it's a very significant issue, because many of our children get their breakfast, get their lunch, and take food home after school, so that their nutritional needs can be met. You make a good point. I think we can take care of that, and I think this municipal aid also goes a long way to helping people who manifest financial need, and one of those financial needs is property taxes.
Thank you, Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Alessandro, my concern is, again, with the 60% property tax relief provision. It's nice, it's a good soundbite, but when we step back and look at the totality of the property tax problem, it's not a 1 or 2 year problem. So what you're doing here is providing a, if you will, an artificial reduction in property tax rates. It's going to add, those property taxes are going to snap right back. And that's going to create as much or more fewer than a stable high rate. So I think for that reason, I'm concerned about what this bill would do. I'd much rather leave it to the discretion of the local select board or the local legislative body. Maybe put a warrant article on telling them. But rather than the state dictating a situation that's going to make the volatility of local property taxes worse in the long run, I think that might be a better way to go.
Well, again, Senator, thank you very much for your comments. I always appreciate your opinion. It's thoughtful and I think well expressed. But indeed, what I'm trying to do is address what people say when they come to see us, and they say we need help to help relieve the property tax burden. That's what this piece of legislation intends to do. And I would hope that someday we're able to go back to the revenue sharing concept that was put in place when Walter Peterson was governor of the state of New Hampshire, when we eliminated the stock and trade or the inventory tax, and we created revenue sharing. And that revenue sharing money given to the communities was promised on an annual basis. And as a result of that, communities did have the option of doing what they wanted with the revenue sharing money, because they knew that it was going to be consistently coming. And as a result of that, they could help with property taxes or help with other things. So hope springs eternal, Senator Gaida, and I'm a very hopeful individual, and I have great faith in the President of the Senate, who I know thinks strongly about this issue, because it's been something we've talked about for years, and I just think it's a good premise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the committee? Seeing Senator Morse.
Just to follow up on Senator D'Alessandro's comment, I may have hope internally, but I certainly have always looked at this as a budget issue. I've told Senator D'Alessandro I support it in a fashion when we get the budget after April 8th, because I do believe we're going to have opportunities to help the local communities. But I have the same concern as Senator Gaida. You know, it seems like every bill, though, that's been written this year is to eliminate Salem from any of the money. So when I do help you in all your communities, just remember me. But
we could never forget you.
I think this is a budget issue, in my opinion, and how it gets there is how I want to work it out. So,
I appreciate that, and I agree with you. It is a budget issue, and that's what was included in the operating budget last time. And I know that you'll think about it in budget time, as we all will. So I appreciate those comments, and thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Kirsten, have we got others?
Yes, our next speaker is Becky Benvenuti.
Good afternoon, Becky.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. And good afternoon, members of the committees. My name is Becky Benvenuti, and I'm the Government Finance Advisor for the New Hampshire Municipal Association. And I am here today to speak in support of SB 118, also known as the Property Tax Relief Act. As Senator D'Alessandro stated, this bill appropriates a total of $40 million, $20 million in municipal aid to towns and cities for each year, fiscal year 22 and 23. The requirement that it provides 60% would be equivalent to $12 million each year of that amount to be used to provide a property tax rate reduction. As Senator D'Alessandro stated, a similar appropriation known as municipal aid was included in the current biennial budget in the amounts, again, of $20 million for both fiscal year 20 and 21. This municipal aid, needless to say, has been very beneficial to municipalities in helping to fund essential services, and this revenue has helped to offset the amounts that would have otherwise been necessary to raise property taxes without that aid. The 2019 appropriation was made from general fund surplus existing at the time, and it was deemed one-time revenue for one-time expenses. It's important, I believe, to reiterate, as Senator D'Alessandro stated, that the 2019 $20 million annual appropriation helped to offset the suspension of the longstanding $25 million annual revenue sharing under RSA 31A, which has not been distributed to municipalities over the past 11 years. Revenue sharing was new legislation created in 1969, and it was entitled Return of Revenues to Cities and Towns, as the sponsor stated when the state reformed how business were taxed. The revenue sharing legislation, however, still exists. Annual distributions to towns and cities made under this chapter were made up and through 2009. However, in the aftermath of the Great Recession, the $25 million revenue sharing appropriation was suspended year after year since 2010 to the present time. Currently, as the towns and cities are going through this year's budget and planning processes for years 2022 and beyond, the loss of the one-time 2019 municipal aid appropriation is a significant budgetary concern. Likewise, the suspension of the longstanding revenue sharing and state aid over the past 11 years has had a significant and consequential budgetary impact on towns and cities paying for essential services and directly impacting the amount of local property taxes necessary to be raised. SB 118 would continue to provide for 2 more years of municipal aid received in the current biennium budget, $20 million for each year. And as discussed, it would also require that 60% of that amount, $12 million for each year, be used to provide a property tax rate reduction, leaving municipalities with just $8 million in this case available to be used at their discretion for budgetary purposes for other municipal essential services. Because this bill does help towns and cities preserve the very critical municipal aid and revenue sharing, we ask you to vote SB 118 to pass. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I just have one. You mentioned that money sent back to the localities would be used for essential services. Who's going to determine what's essential?
Essential services would be determined through the town meeting or the governing body process of planning and establishing their budgets. So ultimately, it's the residents, it's the property taxpayers of each community that would participate in that process and determine how they wish their local governments to be funded.
Okay, so essentially then it could be spent on anything that the voters decide to spend it on.
That's correct, including returning monies for property tax rate reduction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Becky.
You're very welcome.
Have a good afternoon.
If anybody else would like to speak at this time, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, with no hands raised, we will bring to a close the hearing on Senate Bill 118 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 135 and recognize, see still one. I see Caitlin Davis has a hand up. I don't know if that was for the previous one.
I'm not sure, her hand just went up. I can bring her in though, if you'd like her to.
Yeah, if you could bring her in before I close that
Sure.
out. Caitlin, were you wishing to speak on 118?
Good afternoon. I did have something to say about 118. I was planning on speaking during this one. I just wanted to let you know that I was here for this one as to 135. So I can kind of, I guess since you unmuted me, let me tell you my concerns or my comments for 118. And so Senator Hennessy really did address the concerns that the department has with 118 at the time, and we'll hear next more about that from myself and one of my coworkers momentarily. But the free and reduced lunch issue will affect this bill in a slightly different way than it would affect the adequacy number that we'll talk to next, because the way that this works when the 118, it will essentially just reshuffle the amount of money, because at the end of the day, the same amount of money is going to be distributed, which is the $20 million. So different districts may receive a different amount of money than they would if they had a higher free and reduced lunch number. For adequacy, when it makes more of a difference to make sure that you have all of the free and reduced lunch kids counted, because if the kid is not there, you don't get the money. Whereas this one, a town would get money and a kid may be worth more. You might have a different distribution among the towns with this bill, because different towns have had more of success collecting free and reduced lunch applications based on them being in person and or remote. So that was just the department's comments, and we can talk to that a little bit more, and I will actually explain the free and reduced lunch issue in when we talk about 135.
Senator Daniels, you're muted.
Yes, I am. Any questions from the committee for Caitlin? If not, thank you, Caitlin, and we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 118. Open the hearing on Senate Bill 135, recognize Senator Hennessy for the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Erin Hennessy. I am the Senator for District 1, and I'm here to introduce SB 135. Because of the COVID pandemic, our schools have seen a big shift in what they're expecting in funding for next year. Our school formula for the 2021-22 school year takes into account the average daily membership of the kids attending school this current school year, and also what free and reduced lunch forms have been turned in this school year. And because of COVID, many schools have seen either a drop in average daily membership because either people decided to homeschool their kids, or they weren't able to take the time off from work if the kids were in a remote learning session. And so they've been put into either someone else's homeschool setting or a private school. Additionally, the federal government did not require free and reduced lunch forms to be filled out this year. And so many families have not filled those forms out. The school systems have been trying to get all parents to fill these forms out, but because Miss Davis, as Miss Davis says, and I'm assuming she's going to go into more details, many have not been successful in getting the forms filled out because of hybrid situations or remote learning situations, or because parents just don't understand the impact that it has on our school funding. So SB 35 aims to help our school districts' budgets for next school year by removing the COVID impact on our school funding formula. And what it would do is take the higher of this school year's average daily membership number and use that compared to what next school year's average daily membership formula is. And the education department can go into more details on that, but the LBA has provided us with a list of what the impact would be for each of our towns or cities. The total impact is $45.67 million. And I, like Senator D had said on the last bill, I think this bill is very important because these monies would go back to our cities and towns and really help our taxpayers with the cost of education. And if I'm open to questions, if you have it, or I'm sure there's many other people on the line that would be happy to answer questions as well.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Kirsten, I guess we have others that are waiting.
Yes, next I'll bring in Senator Khan. Senator Khan?
You need to unmute.
We can always go back.
You're
Just just a question before we, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Well, I think Senator Khan has a piece of legislation that's quite similar to this, or deals with the same subject matter.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Am I live?
I just wondered if we might think about hearing these bills together, as they both relate to the same subject matter, rather than hearing one and then hearing the other. Just a question, and thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Senator Khan.
I'm sorry, am I interrupting a dialogue there?
Oh, you're recognized.
Okay. Will do, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I just stepped away from the Judiciary Committee and joining you. Thank you for allowing me to speak to Senate Bill 135. I want to support this bill and do so actively. I think an adjustment in the average daily membership of attendance is absolutely necessary. This has been obviously a very disruptive year for all of us, including families and schools. And hopefully this is a once in a lifetime phenomena to which we as the legislature can adjust our current state funding for schools. I also believe that the legislature has a need to address longer term funding needs for public schools as well. In FY21, our education funding did that by reintroducing fiscal capacity disparity aid, providing additional state aid to low property valuation communities, albeit we agreed one time. However, low property valuation communities, and frankly, we all, nearly all of us, I believe, have some in our districts. But these low property valuation communities need to be recognized for the higher costs that they face serving students from lower income families. I think I heard Senator D'Alessandro make mention of a very similar bill that I introduced, I think earlier in the process of introduction. It's LSR 887, which I would hope that the committee would have the opportunity of hearing that bill and receiving some testimony on it, so that you could consider that as alongside your consideration of Senator Hennessy's House Bill 135. I think it would be helpful for the committee. I've received and reviewed a legislative budget assistance completed fiscal note on that bill, and what the cost of adding fiscal capacity disparity aid for low property valuation communities would be if we
Senator
mirrored.
Khan,
Yes.
I think at this time, I'm going to ask that the testimony be focused on 135. I mean, should we see that bill later? I mean, one of the things that we can do is set this one aside till that one catches up, if it ends up coming to finance, and then look at the possibility of somehow merging them together or amending or whatever. But I think for the sake of time and focus right now, we really need to focus on 135.
Certainly. I'll just say the difference in these two bills is probably just $20 million. I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chairman, and I would hope that I could revisit the committee under the idea that you just shared with me. Both bills will reduce the overall cost of adequacy aid from fiscal 21 to fiscal 22. I think that's a good thing. I just will question, have we done what we need to for fiscal 22 to help support our public schools, and particularly in the neediest communities? And I'll leave my testimony at that. Be glad to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we will hear from Caitlin Davis.
Good afternoon. Kristen, could you also unmute my colleague, Mark Meganello?
Absolutely.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Caitlin Davis. I'm a director at the Department of Education. I have my colleague here with me as well. He is going to speak to the fiscal impact of the bill if you have any questions. Senator Hennessy did an excellent job explaining the issue with free and reduced lunch, but I do want to just go ahead and remind the committee exactly what the issue is this year. So school districts submit to the Department of Education twice a year, every single year, free and reduced lunch counts of all of their kids that are in their schools. School districts are responsible for collecting free and reduced lunch applications back from families and qualifying children for either free and or reduced lunch meal programs. There's a variety of different programs across our schools in the state. Most have the same qualification factors, which are 185% of the federal poverty limit and 135% of the federal poverty limit for both free and then reduced lunch price meal options. The free and reduced lunch data is used for a variety of different state and federal calculations, including municipal aid, as you just heard, adequacy, which this bill is discussing, as well as various title formula calculations like Title I, IDEA, which is the special education money, and a number of other calculations. This year specifically, and starting actually at the end of the year last year, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which oversees the free and reduced lunch meal program, provided school districts the authority to waive the qualification requirements for free and reduced lunch meals, meaning that school districts did not need to receive an application back from a parent to qualify and provide a child with a free and or reduced lunch meal, which was a very good advantage for school districts during the pandemic. It was something that's extremely important. However, and so those waivers, they continued them from March of last year into this current phase, which we are right now. The school districts still have that waiver authority. So the problem that this has caused on the other side of things is that it has required, the school districts have not been able to receive that information back. So the benefit that majority of parents see from free and reduced lunch meals are for the free and reduced lunch meal application is the actual free or reduced lunch meal that is provided to the student. And without that information being, or that benefit being provided to the student, or would that benefit be provided without a parent having to do any additional work? Many parents have not provided that information back to the school districts, and then consequently school districts have not been able to collect those applications. Those applications are required to be eligible for all of these additional categories. And that's what the confusing thing is to many people. So the waiver is only to provide the free and reduced lunch meal, but it's not to provide any free and reduced lunch data for the purpose of any federal or state aid calculations. So the federal and state aid calculations still rely on the actual number of applications the schools have received back. So this bill would allow the Department of Education to modify the calculation. And I just want to point that out, that we need legislation for the Department of Education to be able to modify the legislation. The Department of Education can't automatically just use last year's data because we know it's a better data set. We do need legislation to be able to use anything but the data that is specifically called out in law. So that is where we are at the Department of Education right now. And that is the fiscal note that is attached to that, using last year's data versus this year's data. It is our interpretation of the bill that it would use the ADMA for last year for the entire year's calculation. I believe there was some confusion from the committee that was it for just the October 1st calculation or for the payment for the entire year. It is the department's interpretation, it would be the payment for the entire year. And is also the department's interpretation, it would be for all areas of aid, including base aid, free and reduced lunch aid, third grade reading aid, and special education aid. So any questions on the program and or the fiscal note? If Mark can take the questions on the fiscal note.
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Morse.
Thank you, Senator Daniels. Caitlin, I just want to kind of make sure that we're going down the right street here, because the intention was for this legislation just to put back to normal everything that we believed was normal in all our school districts in New Hampshire, and not introduce any new subjects at this point in time, because all our districts are having debates right now and they want to hear from us.
Yes, and this bill does exactly that. It doesn't change anything other than use a different years of data sets. It doesn't add the fiscal capacity aid back in like some legislative proposals. It doesn't add any weighted factors or anything like that. All it does is say, basically, like for a school district, last year you had 200 free and reduced lunch kids. This year you have 100. We know that there's probably more that have refused to fill out the application, so we're going to pay you for 100 this year.
Thank you.
Are there further questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for your presentation. Caitlin, I've attended the school hearing in my town, in the town that I represent. And I think is it true that the towns were expecting that we would make changes that would accommodate the problem that took place moving forward by going back to a time when we had better data to rely upon? Is that your sentiment with regard to the school district meetings that are being held around the state?
I believe school districts have been looking at the variety of legislative proposals and hoping, I guess, one would pass. The Department of Education, however, did do a budget, ran the formula for the school districts for the purpose of using for budgeting on November 15th, like we do every single year, and we used the current data. We did not use a modified data set. So for that November 15th estimate the Department of Education does, we did use the current data. School districts have called the Department of Education multiple times and asked us to use a different data set, to which our response is we have no legislative authority to do that, and we will actually need legislation from the legislature. So call your local representatives and senators, and I believe believe they've done that quite a bit.
Right. I think that's what I'm referencing, the fact that they have been on the phone to their elected representatives, and we've heard that. And as a result, these pieces of legislation are coming forward. Am I correct in assuming that?
I believe so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Okay, Kirsten, we're back to you.
Sure. So next we will bring in, I have Paul Grenier. I believe he's on this call, maybe as just Paul, it looks like. So we'll bring in Paul.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can, Paul. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chairman Daniels, members of the committee. My name is Paul Grenier. I serve as mayor of the city of Berlin. I first want to thank my senator, Senator Hennessy, for introducing Senate Bill 135. I think this is a common sense approach to a situation that was not of anyone's doing. I'm looking at our school system, and I'm looking at the free and reduced lunch. I actually have a bus stop here where all summer long and all fall, kids who are in remote or the hybrid model have been getting delivered lunches to them. And parents are not of the understanding that, you know, signing the form for free and reduced lunch also triggers other issues to deal with education funding. You know, in their minds, they tell me, well, you know, it's free anyway, why fill out the forms? So it's putting a burden on the rest of the taxpayers if this goes unaddressed. So, and I certainly understand the fiscal situation the state's in. So, but I just feel that this is good common sense legislation that fixes a problem for, you know, for this coming school year. And I would ask all of you to support this piece of legislation. I think it's very important. It's not a cure-all, but it's a recognition of a problem that's not of our doing.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Chair.
Great, and next we have Reverend Jay McLeod. I'm guessing he's under St. Andrew's Church on here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. My name is Jay McLeod. I live in Wilmot. I graduated from Kearsarge Regional High School in 1979 and went on to Harvard and Oxford. But my best teachers, I can say in all honesty, were at Kearsarge. They knew how to unlock the potential of us kids. And I support this bill because it will help all schools in New Hampshire, especially working class kids and communities. My hope would be that there'll be no decline in state education aid in the coming year. And I support this bill because it will at least ensure that such aid is not affected by declining attendance due to the pandemic. And school districts will need the money that SB 135 would put back into school budgets in the upcoming financial year. I live in Wilmot and I serve as Episcopal priest of two churches, St. Andrew's in New London and Epiphany in Newport, two very different towns 12 miles apart. I support this bill because it will help all public school pupils in the state, but each of you will understand how, because of our reliance on property taxes to fund education, towns like Newport get hit with a double whammy. Their pupils get an inferior education, and their parents and neighbors pay a far higher property tax rate than in wealthier towns. And so I support any bill that will help our pupils, parents, and teachers, and that helps to level the playing field between wealthy and working class districts. This bill will help. I wish SB 135 could do more, but the bill before you will at least prevent a steeper decline in state support for education, and I urge you to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jeff McLynch.
Good afternoon, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify this afternoon on Senate Bill 135. For the record, my name is Jeff McLynch, and I'm the project director of the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project. The aim of SB 135 is clear. As you've heard today, it seeks to protect against the COVID-19 pandemic's possible impact on school finances. As you've also heard, the need for the bill's enactment is urgent, as communities across New Hampshire are already weighing difficult budgetary decisions for the coming year. So given the longstanding problems that have plagued New Hampshire's school funding system, as well as the new challenges students, families, and school face, I urge the committee to recommend Senate Bill 135 as ought to pass, and the Senate as a whole to act upon the bill as quickly as possible. Senator Hennessy, who I want to thank for putting this bill forward, has already explained the substance of the bill, and Ms. Davis has already gone into some detail about its needs. So I'll just simply say that this bill recognizes that the student counts we're seeing now are not likely to reflect the situation schools will face this fall, and offers a reasonable alternative to calculating state aid. I did want to add, though, that while passage of 135 is certainly vital, it could be strengthened further in order to preserve the progress the legislature made under the current budget in bolstering state education aid and targeting it to those cities and towns most in need. As you recall, the current budget includes what's called additional aid, intended to help cities and towns with higher concentrations of low-income students, as well as fiscal capacity disparity aid, which is designed to help municipalities with comparatively low property values. Those two forms of aid take steps towards addressing some of the flaws inherent in New Hampshire's current approach to funding its schools, and as such ought to be extended and maintained until more comprehensive reforms are adopted. Accordingly, I'd ask the committee to please amend Senate Bill 135 to extend those two forms of aid for another 2 years. As you are no doubt aware, due in part to the pandemic and other factors like the expiration of those forms of aid, total state education aid is expected to fall by some $90 million in the coming year. Such a drop would force many cities and towns to turn to significant property tax increases or severe spending cuts as they set their school budgets for the next academic year. Certainly 135 in its present form would help to reduce the likelihood and potential scale of such rate increases, but maintenance of additional aid and fiscal capacity disparity aid would reduce them still further. And to Senator D'Alessandro's question about how communities might be responding to the possibility of action on the legislature's behalf, I believe it's the case that they're preparing for the worst, which is to say, preparing for the possibility that there may not be action. I believe it was reported recently that Keene, when it acts upon its budget, could see 6% property tax increase as part of its overall budget. So in conclusion, as we know all too well, the pandemic has taken the lives of thousands of folks here in the United States and in the Granite State, disrupted our economy and upended our daily lives in ways large and small. We shouldn't allow it to continue to have adverse consequences for our schools and the children and families they serve. So I'd ask the committee once again to please recommend 135 as ought to pass, and to do so as expeditiously as possible. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
The next name I have signed up to speak is Carl Ladd. I'm not seeing his name on the call. So Carl Ladd, if you are under a phone number or a different name, please virtually raise your hand or press *9. Or if you've designated a colleague to speak for you, if that colleague could please identify themselves. And I'm not seeing any hands raised. So at this time, if anybody else would like to speak, please virtually raise your hand. And Senator Daniels, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, with that, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 135 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 127, which is an omnibus bill. And I'll explain how we're going to go through this. There are multiple parts to it. So I'll recognize the prime sponsor first, and then we will allow the sponsor of each section to testify, and then we will go back. Then we will go back and recognize, starting with part one, going through anyone who wishes to speak to those respective parts. So at this time, we'll call the sponsor, which is Representative Jay Khan. Excuse me, Senator Jay Khan.
Bradley's the sponsor.
Yeah, I thought it was Bradley.
Bradley's the sponsor. Senator Bradley is the prime sponsor.
Sponsor, okay,
And Bradley is here.
thank you, sorry.
The bad penny always shows up.
Yeah, you got that right, Captain.
I knew you'd be there, Jebster.
Thank you
Senator
very
Bradley,
much,
you're
Mr.
recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jeb Bradley from Wolfboro. And pleased to be the sponsor of Senate Bill 127, which has 8 parts in it. And I believe I'm responsible for sections 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8. So if you would like me to go through those now, I'm happy to do that.
Yes, if you would, please.
All right, so section 1 makes annual grants to regional economic development corporations. It starts at the bottom of the first page on line 30, and it would appropriate $200,000 annually, split among the 10 RDCs. The RDCs are instrumental in providing distress loans and loans to small businesses throughout the state, throughout their region. They've been particularly helpful in the pandemic, and funding them, I think, is critically important because better than anyone else, they know the businesses in their area. Part 2, this is one that we have seen last year. This establishes an animal records database. Commissioner Jasper will further testify to this bill and answer any particular questions, but this is an offshoot of all of the work that I think everyone on this committee is familiar with over the last several years to update our animal cruelty statutes to prevent things like the situation that occurred in Wolfboro several years ago with the Great Danes. And we've had a spate of animal cruelty cases. We have made significant upgrades to our statute, in particular, having licensure of pet vendors when they have 25 puppies or cats in a single year. In order to make sure that those pet vendor licensing requirements are adhered to, you need an animal records database. And this was in, I believe it was House Bill 1234 last year, which did not survive the process. And so we are back. I know that there will be a lot of testimony with regard to this bill. I will say I support the increase in fees that are in this bill. The animal records database costs in the range of $250,000 to maybe somewhat over $300,000 if an IT tech person is also necessary. But without it, it's just impossible to know in the situation of Wolfboro if people are trying to skirt around the licensure requirement of the dogs or the cats, and there would be almost no way for the Department of Agriculture or local law enforcement or health officers to know what is happening. I am told there is going to be an amendment to make this optional for people because of the constitutional amendment on privacy. I would urge against that amendment, as this is not a public database, and allowing people to opt out is basically the same as not having the database, as people that don't want to have any licensure requirement would simply opt out. I think there will also be a friendly amendment proposed by animal shelters that would require a health certificate and quarantine requirements for any pets arriving from out of state. So that's part two. The one thing I would ask, if the committee wants to go in a different direction than a fee, please let me know, and because we'll have to work on an appropriation. I think this warrants either the fee or the appropriation if we are going to successfully make sure our animal cruelty provisions are adhered to. The third part of the bill, it makes an appropriation to the Affordable Housing Fund. We, over the last 3 or 4 years, have significantly increased funding for the Affordable Housing Fund. You will hear testimony from Ben Frost, and New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority has submitted a record that letter, that outlines how they use the fund on a revolving loan basis to help capitalize workforce housing and affordable housing around the state. Until 2017, we funded it sporadically, but I believe since then we have added $5 million in 2018 and $10 million in the last budget. And $5 million of that $10 million is an ongoing commitment of transfer from the real estate transfer tax. This piece of House Senate Bill 127 would add another $5 million appropriation in to the Affordable Housing Fund and help with this problem. And I think if you speak with any business leader in the state of New Hampshire, in order to attract the workforce that we need in New Hampshire, affordable housing plays a critical role in that. It is necessary to note that the state can't do it by itself. Local zoning requirements play a big role in affordable housing. However, the ability for the Affordable Housing Fund to help capitalize affordable housing is absolutely essential. And lastly, sections 7 and 8 make appropriations for the Department of Environmental Services for funding water service projects. We have done this historically with state aid water grants for drinking water. One of the appropriations now would be $500,000 for wastewater, which would be a new appropriation. But the section on, and I believe it's section 8 of the bill, it has the ongoing commitment for state aid drinking water grants. I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions from the committee? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator Bradley. Senator Bradley, just one thing with regard to the animal database. You said that you have no problem with the fact that fees would be part and parcel of this piece of legislation. Is that correct?
I voted for it last year. I support it this year. I know that sometimes some people, including you, Senator D'Alessandro, have had some consternation with fees. I know that. I get it. And I'm flexible personally as to whether it's a fee increase to pay for this or an appropriation. My understanding is, and Commissioner Jasper can speak to this, it would be in the range of $250,000 to $300,000 per year. I know, and we'll hear on Thursday from the governor's budget, that funding for new initiatives may be difficult. The main thing I want to convey to the committee is that we have gone to great lengths to strengthen our animal cruelty statutes. But as Commissioner Jasper, I think, will testify, without this database, it will be very hard to have the information necessary for the department to do their job and make sure that people who are supposed to be licensed are licensed and are abiding by our animal cruelty statutes. That's why this is so important. I think, and I would just end on this note, Senator D, of all the legislation I've sponsored over the years, I probably get more, positive support for updating our animal cruelty. And it's not just because Napoleon's always hanging around with me. I think people, generally speaking, across our state have supported it because they saw what happened in Wolfboro. And it wasn't just Wolfboro, and it wasn't just the Great Danes. There have been a number of other high-profile animal cruelty cases. We had to do something about it. So if we fund it with an appropriation, I'm good to go. If we fund it with a fee increase, I'm also good to go because of the need to make sure that our animal cruelty statutes are enforceable.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Bradley.
Thank you.
We'll now recognize Senator Khan, who is the prime sponsor of Part 4, that's LSR 211030. Senator Khan, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Senator Khan represents District 10, which includes 15 of 23 towns in Cheshire County. And I'll just say one quick word about animal cruelty and those cases being spread in other parts of the state. It was in my district in the town of Marlborough, where 52 dogs were needing to become wards of the county and the Humane Society. It was extraordinarily costly for the Humane Society and in approaching $500,000 of unexpected expenses. So I think Senator Bradley speaks for many of us who are experiencing these type of cruelty incidents. But let me address Section 4, Mr. Chairman. You appropriately note that I've introduced the notion of the state establishing a fund for helping schools through the Department of Education with improving the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, but in particular, the air quality improvements that are needed in our public school buildings. When you look at the CDC guidelines for reopening of schools, high on their list is that there needs to be adequate ventilation in spaces as well as trying to provide adequate spacing in those classrooms and other spaces in the schools. This is not unlike what we faced in 2016 and 2017 when the legislature, acting because of violence that was taking place in schools, to create the school safety fund. That in those two fiscal years amounted to nearly $30 million that we established a committee to act to review proposals and distribute those funds, which I think we've now finally matched the final grant. But that was a matching fund. I guess my suggestion on this is that you could reduce this amount to wherever you feel, or increase it to wherever this committee believes would be an appropriate level. I would just ask that we include something that is a part of SB 127. And the reason I say that is that there's a lot of attention being given to the proper health and ventilation in our schools. It's being shown by our federal government, and there could be dollars that are available to districts to make these modifications over the next couple of years. And being able to adjust a funding level to match that federal funding, to make sure that schools don't do partial projects, but in fact address the full needs of their schools to properly keep them safe for students and staff. I think is a wise move for us at this juncture. So I'll conclude my testimony, Mr. Chairman. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Khan. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we'll go on to part 5, LSR 210920, and recognize the sponsor, Senator French.
Senator Daniels, I
Yes.
believe that Josh Elliott will be speaking on behalf of Senator French.
Okay, Chair recognizes Josh Elliott.
There we go. Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Josh Elliott, Deputy Chief of Staff for the State Senate. I'm here on behalf of Senator French to introduce Part 5, which is LSR 21-0902, crediting excess funds in the Investor Education Fund to the FRM Victims Fund. This bill, as the analysis would suggest, credits any excess funds that would have normally gone into the general fund up to the amount of $500,000, rather than lapsing into the general fund, would be contributed to the FRM Victims Contribution Recovery Fund. With that, I am not very familiar with this issue, so I'd ask the committee to perhaps ask other folks if they have any questions on this.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Part 6, recognize Senator Birdsell. This is LSR 210981.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing this bill. It's actually, for the record, my name is Regina Birdsell. I am State Senator for District 19, which encompasses the towns of Derry, Hampstead, and Windham. And I'm here to present part 6, which is relative to the adequacy payments for homeschooled students. It came to my attention in a meeting that I had, a legislative meeting with the Derry Town Council and the Derry School Board. And they had asked me to look into why elementary or K through 8 were not eligible for the to be paid the adequacy when they service homeschooled children. Now, when I looked into the RSA 198:38, it does allow the servicing of high schoolers, but it eliminated the capability of K through 8 or 9. So this bill is to kind of fill that gap. It authorizes, if any school districts are servicing homeschool children for any purpose, they're allotted a portion of their adequacy payments. And that's basically it in a nutshell. And I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Senator Birdsell. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And sections 7 and 8 have already been covered by Senator Bradley. So we'll go back to anyone wishing to speak to part 1 of the bill.
If you would like to speak on part 1 of the bill, please virtually raise your hand now. If you are calling in by phone, you can do that by pressing *9. And we have Jack Cuddy.
You have to unmute, Jack.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for hearing us on this important bill that I want to thank Senator Bradley for putting in. He recognized the importance of the regional development corporations. And I'd also like to say, give my best to Senator D'Alessandro, who was a former teacher of mine back in the day from Manchester at Bishop Bradley High School. Go Pioneers.
One of the great academic institutions.
It certainly was, Senator.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. My name is Jack Cuddy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mount Washington Valley Economic Council. And I'm here just to give a quick testimony on the bill and the reason why we feel as though it's really important, and that Senator Bradley actually wanted to sponsor the bill. He recognized the work that we do. The regional development corporations have been around for over 25 years. We, for a very long time, were considered the unfunded arm of DRED, because we were boots on the ground in the communities that we serve. This 10 of us that represent the entire state. Our work is providing technical assistance and loans to small and emerging businesses. And over the years, I can tell you from my experience in the council, we've done over $3 or $4 million in revolving loan funds in gap financing and small startups and things of that nature. I will tell you that during the pandemic back in March, we were able to put, as I said in my testimony, we were able to put $800,000 out in small business loans. And I'm talking about $25,000 or less to 29 businesses in the Mount Washington Valley. That was with very favorable terms that allowed them to prepare for dealing with the pandemic as far as what the ordinances and towns were going to require them to do to be able to open up their businesses with restaurants, motels, and so on and so forth. The most important thing, and I can't emphasize it enough, my colleagues and I have worked very, very hard over the years, and the funding that we have used to receive has diminished. And with the pandemic, the ability for us to raise funds will become less over the next couple of years, I suspect. One of the things I just want to quickly tell you is that I personally, we're doing 2 loans today that would not have happened. One is a small business manufacturer, small boot manufacturer with 6 employees that has been in business for a very long time. He wants to sell his business, and the person that he's selling the business to has worked for him for probably 5 or 6 years, has the opportunity to buy it. This business is not bankable because the person who's buying it doesn't have the collateral or the necessary equity to be able to purchase it outright. What we're doing is we're doing a small micro loan for him. And I worked with this individual since last July to get him ready to be able to get the planning for it, this business planning, and so on and so forth. So that's one example that my board, my loan committee reviewed the work, and they approved it. So this is a business that's been around for about 15, 20 years. That's going to be sold, and it's going to be a new person that's going to come in and do it. That's the kind of work we do. The other loan that I have recently is with working with TD Bank to do a 504 SBA loan with them that provides them the opportunity. We provide the equity position that the 504 program requires. So those are the types of work that we do as RDCs, and we do a lot of it. And the monies that we get to loan out, basically we have to apply to. We use USDA, we use the intermediary relending program that we borrow those monies for 1% interest rate, and then we loan it out, and so on and so forth. So I can't express the enjoyment that I've had over the last 20 years in working with small businesses, and as my colleagues can say the same thing. So I strongly support it. I certainly hope that the senators can support it. It's an important thing for us to move forward on. And with the pandemic, we probably our resources will not be as healthy as they were in the beginning of before the pandemic happened, as far as fundraising and so on and so forth. So again, I thank you for hearing me, and I have some written testimony that I provided. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Jack. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next individual with their hand raised is under the title of what looks to be a building address, so I don't have a name. So I will allow them in, and they will need to state their first and last name for the record.
Good afternoon. This is Justin Slattery with the Belknap Economic Development Council. My apologies for the address there. Nice to see you all. I am the executive director of the Belknap Economic Development Council, which is located in Belknap County and is focused on economic development in the Greater Lakes region. My colleague Jack Cuddy and friend up in Mount Washington did a great job of describing the work we do, working throughout the state. But Belknap Economic Development Council is one of 10 nonprofit regional development corporations, and I'm the current chair of the Alliance of Regional Development Corporations, which represents the 10 of us. I have also provided written testimony in support of this legislation that Senator Bradley has drafted, but I also wanted to just strongly voice my support as well. We work day in and day out with our communities and our businesses, in particular our small businesses, and what we typically describe as our micro enterprise businesses, which are typically family businesses and startup businesses, and 1 to 5 employees throughout the state, and helping them grow and access gap financing or technical assistance or other services to succeed. So I wanted to call in today and voice my support for this bill, and we greatly appreciate your consideration, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Alan Reeds.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I trust you can hear me fine.
We can.
Great. I'm Alan Reeds, Director of Public and Government Affairs for the Hanover Co-op Food Stores. We have 4 stores, 2 auto service centers, and an off-site production kitchen in the Upper Valley. Our co-op employs about 360 people. I'm speaking in support of SB 127 Part 3. I hope that every person on this call lives in an affordable home. Each of us may have different qualities in our New Hampshire housing that we want, but I suspect affordability is on the list of everyone in today's meeting.
Alan, can you please suspend for a moment? I think just for the sake of us taking notes in the testimony, we wanted to go part by part.
I see.
So
I missed that. I'm sorry, and I'll step back and then lower my hand and raise it when I hear part 3 indicated.
Thank you very much.
My apologies. Thank you.
If anybody else would like to speak on part 1 of the bill, please raise your hand now. And Senator Daniels, I'm not seeing any more hands for part 1.
Okay, we'll go to part 2.
If you'd like to speak on part 2 of the bill, please raise your hand now. I'm bringing in Sean Jasper.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. Dr. Crawford is on the line as well, and I'd ask that he be unmuted at this time if possible, so that if there are any questions that I can't answer, he'll be available. The animal database bill is not something that we sought per se, but it was a result of the requirements the legislature put on the department to lower the number of animals required to be considered a pet vendor, and other changes that were made. We were already in failure, as it were, because there are about 80,000 just health certificates, let alone rabies certificates. So just with 80,000 health certificates, there's no way that our staff is able to deal with those. We don't even have them all sent to us, because what are we possibly going to do with 80,000 pieces of paper? It's coming in just one thing. So as a solution to what the legislature asked us to do, we proposed a database. Last year, it was successful in getting both chambers with the $2 fee attached to that. Unfortunately, it was caught up of one of them vetoed. So we're back again this year, and I thank Senator Bradley for introducing the bill. There's simply no way, unless you want to provide us with about 4 more employees, which doesn't make any sense, and we don't have any place to house them anyhow, that we can do this out of database. I was able to see money that we had in a couple of our dedicated funds that would be available to create the database, but there is no way for us to sustain that without a fee or an appropriation. I think particularly when it comes to the health certificates, that it makes a lot of sense to have a fee, because as it is, if we request, and we can request the veterinarians to send those records to us, they have to print them out, they have to put them in an envelope, they have to mail them to the department. So they have already have an embedded cost in doing all of those things, which probably would come close to, if not exceeding, the $2. So this, we don't feel, is really on anyone in any way. We feel it actually, in many ways, it may actually be a reduction in their actual cost, but we do need to maintain it. We also will ultimately need to have an IT person to run this, as you all know. It's just not something that any person can do. So if you want us to do the job that you've asked us to do, this is our solution to that. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have about it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none?
All right, sorry, I do have one other comment. Senator Bradley alluded to the amendment that has been proposed by former Representative Kirk, and that really would render the database useless, because if people were able to redact their names and their addresses, we would not be able to enforce the law, and there'd be really no point to this, because we think people such as the individual from Wolfboro, who was really the impetus for heading down this path, those type of people would certainly just have their names and addresses redacted. This is not a public database. This is really no different than the state police or town police having access to your name and address on your driver's license. Nobody else can access that. So there's no constitutional issue here. The state maintains many databases with names and addresses, and this is not something that would be open to the public. So not only is the amendment not needed, it actually renders the program totally useless. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I think we're all set. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Next, we have Stacy Ober.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. It's good to be with you this afternoon. My name's Stacy Ober. I am the Government Affairs contact in New England for the American Kennel Club. And I'm grateful for this time to speak with you on Senate Bill 127 Part 2, and to share that both the American Kennel Club and New Hampshire Dog Owners of the Granite State, are opposed to this draft as written. I will acknowledge that despite statements that this animal records database had been approved in the House and Senate last year. Many of you are aware that we have continued to work to address concerns with this language, and we are grateful that in the refile, there were some changes that were made after our meetings this fall with Commissioner Jasper, for instance, to acknowledge that reference to health certificates in the legislative text was causing confusion because there are multiple purposes for which health certificates are issued. I just want to first say a little bit about the American Kennel Club. We're recognized and trusted as the expert in canine health, breeding, training, and in responsible dog ownership. And we represent more than 5,000 dog clubs nationally, including 22 in New Hampshire. And to give you an appreciation of how popular dog activities and dog sports are, I want you to know that in 2019, we licensed 141 events in New Hampshire with more than 23,000 dogs participating. And surveys that we've done demonstrate that exhibitors at AKC conformation and performance shows spend an average of $685 per show weekend. So it's a significant sport that's really enjoyed by individuals in New Hampshire who are passionate about their dogs. These are individuals who are not in the business of selling their dogs. It's a hobby or an avocation where they are breeding purebred dogs for the purpose of improving and enhancing a breed that's recognized by the American Kennel Club or another registered breed association, and they only offer dogs for sale, puppies for sale, privately, individual to individual, and they are just the offspring of their personally owned animals on occasion that they will do that. And yes, in 2019, the changes to the pet vendor licensure requirements were made in the spirit of wanting to track anyone who is transferring a large volume of dogs. And I want to make it unequivocally clear that both AKC and New Hampshire Dogs animal cruelty is an unconscionable act, and we support enforcing the animal cruelty laws. However, I want to just acknowledge that the cases that have been referenced, for instance, the Christina Fay case with the Great Danes that she owned in her home, and Rep. Khan mentioning the gentleman from Marlborough that had 52 Labrador retrievers in a bathtub. These are individuals that appear to be suffering from mental illness, and there is a recognized disorder called animal hoarding disorder, where these individuals are not transferring and selling dogs, they are collecting dogs. And because of their illness, they're in denial about the inadequate care and conditions that the animals are living in and the unsanitary conditions they're living in. In that regard, to address the problem, I want to just acknowledge with the committee, we have, with Representative Chairman Howard Pearl, filed legislation defining animal hoarding disorder again this session that we hope will move forward to address that policy concern. But when the law was changed in 2019 and reduced the number of dogs that you could transfer and sell in 1 year from 50 by 50% down to 25%, it did create issues with some of our hobby breeders in New Hampshire. You will know that even the Senate last year, in deliberating House Bill 1234, an attorney came forward that's representing a breeder right now that's unable to get municipal zoning compliance permit in order to get a state pet vendor license, which is required in the application. And the concern is that they have been producing working dogs that they are providing for bomb and drug detection and police canines, less than 50, but more than 25. And now the town is basically categorizing them as commercial and is unwilling to acknowledge their property as commercially zoned. So I'm not familiar with what the amendment is that Senator Bradley is talking about around a voluntary compliance with the pet vendor license. I've not seen an amendment such as that, but we have continued to work with Commissioner Jasper's office, with Representative Pearl, and had the hearing on House Bill 532, which is identical to this language, at the end of January over in the House, and have been working to amend some of these problems. One of the other issues I want to acknowledge is that dog owners are paying municipal fees that are shared not only with their local town, but also with the state, to verify compliance with the rabies vaccination requirement. And that fee goes also to a state fund that provides spay and neuter services to homeless and stray dogs in New Hampshire. Under the language that you have before you in Part 2 of this bill, the database includes data that not only would track the transfer of a dog's animal health record, but also, if you look at it, it talks about data such as rabies vaccinations, lists, health certificates, animal records. And our concern with the bill is that there's a system in place already that oversees the dog rabies verification that's working quite well. And there would be this additional fee on dog owners to pay for this animal records database. The second issue that we have is, if you look at it closely, the number of sets of data would result in numerous individuals accessing the database and also being able not only to submit, but also access that information. So we've been working again with the House Environment and Agriculture Committee to narrow down exactly what is the information the Department of Agriculture needs in order to enforce and implement the pet vendor license. And secondly, to ensure the privacy of that information. We know that government having access to personally identifiable information poses a risk. I will share with all of you my personal experience. I've been in this position for 2 years, although I've done government relations for 20. The first time I went to speak at a public hearing, there were animal rights activists in the room who hissed at me when I went to speak for the first time. And that's because there are some individuals who believe breeding dogs is inappropriate and unethical when there are strays out there and rescue dogs in need of a good home. They see breeding dogs as taking a good home away from an animal that's in need of a home, and they're philosophically opposed to breeding dogs. And there have been instances of harassment and intimidation. So this is why the privacy components of the database are exceedingly important to all of us. So I'm asking the committee, if you would, to work with the House Environment and Agriculture Committee on their amendment to address these concerns. We're hopeful that they're close to resolving the concerns and getting this bill right before it goes to the governor's desk for signature. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Stacy. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Anybody else would like to speak on Part 2 of 127, please raise your hand now. All right, and we have Nancy Holmes.
Afternoon, Nancy.
Did I? Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nancy Holmes. I'm coming to you today from New Boston, New Hampshire, and I want to speak against Part 2 of SB 127 as written. Ms. Ober outlined the fact that there's been a lot of work in the House to make this bill more, I think, both safer and less costly. And I wanted to point out that in addition to my written testimony that I sent in on this, there are things in the bill as written that are a real problem. The number of people accessing the database is a real problem in terms of security. It also pays no attention to the fact that not all veterinarians are computerized and not all are even, are on the internet. So that would pose a difficulty. I'd like to compare this for you, I think, to something you're probably all familiar with, which is filing your taxes. You can file your taxes electronically. The IRS does not get on your computer when you do that. You do not sign into the IRS computer to do that either. You send the IRS a file. If you are not capable of doing that and you do your own taxes, you can send this in as a paper submission for your tax information. Right now, the bill presumes everybody is capable of accessing the state database via computer. That's not necessarily true. It's going to cause a problem when they get down to it. Another issue that I saw in this is that it presumes that rabies certificates, which I don't believe should be held at the state level other than perhaps as information, but rabies certificates in dogs are given, the rabies vaccines are given once a year for the first 2 years, and after that, they are given every 3rd year. So it would be up to 3 to 4 years before the database was even up to date on which animals had had rabies shots. Because of that, I believe we should leave the licensing portion with the towns the way it has always been, to make sure that everybody in town complies with licensing and rabies vaccination of their dogs. It's convenient. Among other things, I can go down to town hall and inform them when I've had dogs pass away so that I'm not going to be licensing them again. Or if I have transferred a dog, I can inform them of that so that they don't have to worry about the rabies certificate again on that dog. I can't see that as being very easy for the average citizen if the information is being kept at the state level and used for dog licensing. The number of people who are accessing the database is being coded into the law. This is not the best or most efficient or most cost-effective method of designing a database and its access. By coding things into law, you're precluding better methods of transferring data, better methods of security. It really is not a good idea to put into law how you plan to code things. What you need to do is say, yes, we want a database. Yes, we expect it to do this, but that we expect it to be designed with best practices and most cost effectively as possible. You know, I think it's really going to cost way more than anybody is thinking to get everybody up and forced to do this with the health certificates. I also am in agreement with Ms. Ober on the fact that 25 as a limit for before you get turned into a commercial vendor is an issue, because this highly prejudices the licensing process in favor of people who breed small dogs over people who breed large dogs. Because I could have 2 litters of Great Danes and have 28 puppies to transfer. I could have 10 litters of Chihuahuas and have 15 puppies to transfer. So you're not saving anything by this. I think moving up to 35 before you decide somebody's commercial evens it out a little bit over what is being done right now to the large dog breeders. I also have to say, I think that for many families, finding a dog bred locally in New Hampshire, where they can see the parents, where they can obtain a puppy to raise as part of their family, is extremely important to our state. Not everybody is right for a rescue dog. Not every rescue dog is right for everybody. I don't care how many of you, how many times you offer me a pit bull as a potential dog to adopt. No matter how good that dog is, it is not going to replace the Yorkie I want or the Mastiff that I want. It's not the same. Dogs are not apples and oranges, and people deserve to be able to get a choice in the state of locally raised and bred animals. I'm hoping that you understand what I'm saying about the tax the tax filing system. What I'm talking about with that is the fact that there's many methods around that allow you to transfer data from one place to another without it being a security leak and without everybody having their hands on the database the information is going to. I think it's a far more secure idea to transfer the data, let a program at the state level go through the data and determine it isn't harmful and then post it to the database than it would be to have everybody and their cousin and their backup person and their person who covers for vacations accessing the database. I am also concerned because I know I also have been harassed when I've come up to testify and on animal type bills where I did not hold the same opinion as the animal shelter and animal rights people. I've been photographed, I've been had comments made to me. I've had giant murmuring in the background, all that. So it makes you uneasy. It makes it harder to testify for people. I think the database would be a big help to the Department of Agriculture. I think they're going about it the wrong way. And I think it's going to cost a lot more than it would if they changed this bill to match more closely what has been done in the House for House Bill 532. There's been a lot of work done on it by a lot of different people. And I'd like to see an amendment put forward that matched up the House bill, which I hope some of you will be happy to go and research. Okay, I'm sorry, I've been nattering on. I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
If anybody else would like to speak on part 2, please raise your hand now. And I'm seeing Sean Jasper's hand raised.
Welcome back, Commissioner.
Thank you. There's a lot I could say. I just want to address two points here. This system will not allow anyone to access database. The people who enter information will be able to look at their own information collectively, which we think is important for them to be able to go back and look at that. They won't be able to look at anybody else's information. I think that's important. The other thing that I find very frustrating, we've been working on this for well over a year now. Many people have talked about veterinarians who don't have access to internet. We have yet to hear from those veterinarians, nor have we heard from the Veterinarians Association that there are any members who don't. So this seems to be a red herring where people are speaking for veterinarians who don't actually seem to exist. It's a nice theory. And we have, I think, provided ways if that happens to take care of the situation. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Who's next, Kirsten?
If anybody else would like to speak on part 2 of the bill, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any more hands for part 2.
Okay, we'll go on to part 3.
If you'd like to speak on part 3 of the bill, please raise your hand now. First, we'll bring in Alan Reeds.
Okay, and I do see that we have a number of people that wish to speak. Just would ask if you have testimony that's already been stated by someone else, if you could just reiterate that you support the previous testimony and not keep replicating the same thing. So we'll recognize the first thing, Alan Reeds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will start from the top, but I'm also pleased to say that my testimony is less than 2 minutes. I'm Alan Reeds, Director of Public and Government Affairs for the Hanover Co-op Food Stores. We have 4 stores, 2 auto service centers, and an off-site production kitchen in the Upper Valley. Our co-op employs about 360 people. I'm speaking in support of SB 127 Part 3. I hope that every person on this call lives in an affordable home. Each of us may want different qualities in our New Hampshire housing, yet I suspect affordability is on the list of everyone in today's meeting. In the 1990s, I purchased my first home and have lived in that Plainfield residence ever since. When I look at the current housing market, it startles me to see how times have changed. Today, the idea of a younger me working to start my own business and my wife, a nurse early in her career, being able to raise our family here is almost far-fetched. We would be among the many locals taking our skills and family elsewhere. I won't repeat the data that you know about the housing problem in the state, but I will say that the Hanover Co-op Food Stores, New Hampshire's $84 million locally owned cooperative, is dealing with an acute shortage of entry-level and mid-level workers. And we're a business that offers robust benefits, but none of those, not the health or the dental insurance, not the funded 401k or employee discounts, or even our average starting wage of $14 an hour, can overcome a lack of places for a worker to live and perhaps raise a family. This state needs affordable housing that people can live in, people including local retired folks looking to downsize. SB 127 Part 3 is a step in that direction. Builders who commit to projects that serve buyers on a budget deserve our creative support. New Hampshire businesses that rely on a robust workforce know the solution won't arrive overnight. Yet SB 127 Part 3 is part of the answer. I hope you'll support this legislation and encourage your colleagues to do the same, because affordable homes should remain part of the Granite State. And isn't that what we all want for housing and for the people trying to stay here? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you and have a good afternoon.
Next, we have Ben Frost.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Ben Frost. I'm the Managing Director for Public Affairs and Policy at New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, and I'm here to speak in favor of Section 3. And thanks, Senator Bradley, for introducing this legislation. Alan Reitz mentioned the numbers, but without saying them, I think we're all aware, the state has a shortage of something on the order of 20,000 units to buy, to rent, to meet our current demand, much less accommodate future growth. We know that prices are going through the roof to purchase. The inventory of homes for sale is critically low. Days on market is less than a month. And for rental units, the prices have gone up 20% over the past 5 years, and we have a vacancy rate below 2%. In fact, the vacancy rate has been below 3% for the past 7 years. Times are tough if you're looking for a place to live and you don't have a lot of money to spend on it. There are a lot of different solutions to this problem, none of which will alone solve the issue, but working together, they can make a dent in this. And one of those parts of the solution is the Affordable Housing Fund. This was created by the legislature in 1988. And since that time, the legislature has appropriated a total of $27.6 million to the Affordable Housing Fund. It's been used by New Hampshire Housing, which is the administrator of the fund on behalf of the state, in 85 projects all over the state, from North Stratford up in Coos County down to Hinsdale over to Portsmouth, in projects that are general occupancy, elderly housing, special needs housing. And it's that last category that is particularly important in some regards, because the Affordable Housing Fund, because of the way the legislature set it up, provides us at New Hampshire Housing with great flexibility in how we use it. So we're able to use the Affordable Housing Fund in some projects where funds simply aren't available otherwise. So I'm talking about projects like transitional housing for people with substance use disorder, or homeless vets, or people with developmental disabilities, or victims of domestic violence. This has been the funding source for a lot of those projects statewide, and it is really vitally important. And Senator Bradley, when he introduced Part 3, he mentioned what the legislature had done in the current budget in FY 19 or FY 20, an allocation of $5 million to the Affordable Housing Fund. And starting in FY 21, a dedicated $5 million from the real estate transfer tax on an ongoing basis. And this is really important. What is provided here is in effect, a one-time $10 million additional appropriation to the Affordable Housing Fund, which would be well used by developers all over the state. We're able to leverage the Affordable Housing Fund, sometimes as much as 10 or 12 to 1 against federal funds. So it is an important gap filler, if you will, in a financing portfolio for a lot of different projects. I'm happy to take any questions and explain how we use the fund and look forward to your consideration of this important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. we
Thank you.
Next will be Carmen Lorenz.
Good afternoon, Carmen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Executive Director at Lakes Region Community Developers up in Laconia. We are a nonprofit developer of housing and community facilities. We've been around for about 30 years. We currently have a portfolio of 366 affordable rental units in 6 different towns throughout the Lakes region. And I'm here to speak in favor of Part 3 of SB 127. As a nonprofit developer, you know, our goal, our mission as an organization has always been to build healthy, affordable homes for the people who live and work here year round. And I can say that in our experience, not only has the housing market gotten tighter, our vacancy rate is less than 2%, which is, we've never had one that low, but it's also harder to get your projects funded because there's a lot more competition from other nonprofit and for-profit developers all over the state. So, you know, we have to put in a project 2-3 times, apply over and over again before we can get funded, simply because it's just so competitive, because the demand is so big. So I do believe that this additional one-time appropriation could help get us, you know, more projects funded in the next couple of rounds. And we do also do supportive housing, as Ben referenced, for those special needs populations. And in Laconia, we are seeing, you know, homelessness unlike we've ever witnessed before, unsheltered homelessness. And so doing some supportive housing projects and having a toolbox to build that with is extremely important, so that we can provide housing for these difficult to house populations that we're seeing here. So thank you very much for your time. And again, I hope that you vote in favor of this section of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Have a good afternoon.
Next will be Doug Marino.
Afternoon, Doug.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chairman Daniels and members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. In the interest of the committee's time, I won't reiterate testimony that's already been given. My name is Doug Marino. I work for an organization called 603 Forward. We advocate on behalf of young people in New Hampshire and are interested in making New Hampshire a more equitable and attractive place for young people to come and live. So affordable housing is a big priority of ours, and we strongly support Section 3 of this bill, and applaud Senator Bradley for his leadership on this, as well as many other senators. And so, like I said, I won't take up too much of your time. I would refer you to the written testimony I sent over, but I do want to reiterate that this is extremely important for the youth of New Hampshire and for our economic future. And so I thank you for taking this on, and I urge you to support Section 3. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doug, for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a good afternoon.
Next, we have Ellen Grow. Oops. Here we go.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
You can.
Super. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for the chance to speak. I'm speaking in favor of SB 127 Part 3. And my name's Ellen Grow. I'm the Executive Director of Concord Coalition to End Homelessness. We're in Concord, New Hampshire, and we provide crisis services for people who are experiencing homelessness, including a winter shelter and a daytime resource center where people can you still hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, there was some feedback. Where people can get help accessing housing and other social services. And we also provide permanent supportive housing to people who have been long-term homeless and who are struggling with disabilities. And right now we are currently able to serve about 20 people with permanent supportive housing. And the person receives rental assistance so that they can afford the rent, and they also receive ongoing case management. About 14 of those clients are renting apartments on the open market, and 4 of them are in a building that we have purchased and renovated using New Hampshire housing financing. And I have to tell you, the clients who are trying to find apartments on the open market, it is so incredibly hard for them to find an available unit that's within the allowable rent, which in Concord is about $1,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. There just aren't enough units, and the vacancy rate is incredibly low. And that's what caused our agency decide that we needed to take on housing development. And that's what had us begin our little project, our 4-unit project that New Hampshire Housing Finance Agency was able to fund. And it was with their funding that we were able to make this affordable for our clients who are coming from long-term homelessness. So while I fully support this bill because of its effect on our workforce, which is essential, I also support it because creating more affordable housing in New Hampshire is essential if we're going to end the homeless crisis in New Hampshire. There's been numerous studies that show when people struggle from long-term homelessness, they make very high use of public services like the hospitals, the emergency rooms, ambulance, jail, shelters, and it's all at a very high cost to the community as a whole. And when long-term homeless people can become housed and receive ongoing supportive services, all of their use of those emergency services goes way down, and it actually costs less than having someone remain in long-term homelessness. And the only way that we can do that is if there's more affordable housing units available for housing people coming from long-term homelessness. So, and the Affordable Housing Fund is a key vehicle to being able to do that. So I urge you to make this investment in New Hampshire. Our neighboring states are making significant investments in it as well, and New Hampshire needs to join that. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ellen. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Next,
Senator Daniels, you owe me $350 because to keep up with your meetings, you got 2 Diet Cokes going on.
We appreciate your efforts in seeding the economy.
next we have Jonathan Spira-Savitt.
Hi. Thank you so much, Senators, for letting me speak. My name is Jonathan Spira-Savitt. I'm a resident of Nashua, Ward 1. I'm the rabbi at Temple Beth Abraham and chair of the Nashua Area Interfaith Council. I'm speaking in support particularly of this section of the bill, something I've spoken to Senator Rosenwald about from time to time. We have a group that we've created. We call it the Greater Nashua Interfaith Housing Justice Group. And we kind of found our way to the issue of affordable housing in a way, not through our original intentions. We've looked at what some of the needs were in the greater Nashua area, and we talked about the kinds of things that are often the emotional issues and the downstream issues of need and poverty. And we just kept finding people pointing us toward housing as an upstream issue. It's not one of the kind of sexier emotional issues, but it's behind a lot of the other issues, the ones that people before me have spoken about. Even just having a stable community where people who live and work and serve in the same place are part of the same community. We would like our community, particularly of Nashua and the surrounding, to be a place where the people who are our public safety people, our teachers, our healthcare workers, our home care workers can afford to live here and be part of one community. And we know also that stable housing is what enables kids to learn, to stay in one school, to have a place to go to and do their homework, and to be supportive, to have friends in the neighborhood, and to feel more connected. It's a big social determinant of health on all levels. I obviously don't have to repeat the kind of constellation about the things that are pressing on affordable housing. But I want to say that our group particularly has been trying to figure out how we as citizens can help unearth other resources. Some of it is financial. People like me who are leaders of religious congregations, means that we know people who work in all the different aspects of housing, whether it's real estate or brokers or finance or building construction. And there's a lot of creativity and a lot of resources that we can help unearth as a different kind of network. We have been researching, even as clergy people, things about finance and how affordable housing funds work. And we're ready to work in Nashua to create in parallel with the state fund, a fund that doesn't exist in our community, to leverage the state investments even further. We are hoping that that will help us be able to talk to private developers in our area and help groups here like NeighborWorks expand substantially. And all the investment in the state trust fund will just, as I think Ben Frost said earlier, just leverages multiples of more money, not just from federal sources, but from local sources we hope to work with our community to establish, and even private or philanthropic other sources that haven't been tapped into. So I want to thank you for working on this issue. $5 million low for the state, but it's a start. And we hope we'll keep this momentum. And I urge you to support the bill for this part of it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a good afternoon.
Next, we have Brandon LeMay.
Good afternoon.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman, and good afternoon, Senators. Thank you so much for hearing me today. So I am an organizer with Rights and Democracy. I am the Housing Justice Advocate, here to voice my support of Senate Bill 127, specifically Part 3. And I believe it would be a great way for Republicans and Democrats in the state Senate to live up to their goal of increasing housing affordability for Granite Staters. Vermont just recently passed funding somewhere around $35 million towards affordable housing, and it was signed by the Republican governor. This bill allocates a modest $5 million, but it is a step in the right direction and has our organization's full support. Democrats and Republicans can agree that in order for businesses to succeed, they need workers who can afford to live in the same cities and towns that they work in. Business owners need customers who can afford to spend money on coffee, dining out, and shopping at their businesses. Currently in my city, Manchester, folks are spending upwards of 40–50% or more of their income on rent. I currently volunteer for a charity that provides food, clothes, and other basic necessities to the homeless and those at risk of being homeless. We used to only help homeless individuals, but we're increasingly talking to folks who don't have enough money to buy food after paying rent. And I think about, the fact that, they don't have that money to order takeout. They don't have money to buy that new car, or they don't have any extra money to save up for a house. So freeing up income would mean more money going to small businesses, and it would mean more economic freedom for the middle and working class of New Hampshire. So thank you very much for hearing me out today, and I will cede the rest of my time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Harrison Kanzler.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Harrison Kanzler. I'm the executive director for the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition. We're a nonprofit advocacy group that works on affordable housing with the communities in the Mount Washington Valley. I will keep this very brief. So many people have touched on such incredible points. This is obviously a highly needed thing around the entire state. I did just want to speak to specifically the Mount Washington Valley very briefly. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It is a tourist destination for our state. As a result, economically, that means that the predominant employment opportunities in our area are part-time in retail and hospitality, industries that have been hit very hard due to COVID, also industries that tend to have lower paying jobs. As a result, there are many, many people in the Mount Washington Valley who are having a hard time affording rents. We've heard a couple different citations on, rental availability, vacancy rates in the state. In the Mount Washington Valley, it is less than 1%. We often estimate it to be about 0%. From month to month, there are no new listings for long-term rentals at all. So not only do we need them to be affordable, we also just need units in general, and an increase in this fund would go a long way to making that happen. And again, just for the sake of affordability, Housing and Urban Development says that in Carroll County, where the Mount Washington Valley is located, a 2-bed, 1-bath rental at 60% of median income, which would be affordable, should be roughly $970, including utilities. That same 2-bed, 1-bath in the Mount Washington Valley with utilities is probably going to run you around $1,400 or $1,500 a month. Obviously, there's a huge disparity there between what the federal government deems to be affordable in our area and the reality of the market in our area. As a result, we need more, and I think that this goes a long way to making that happen, and we really appreciate your support. And the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition supports this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Next, we have Alyssa Margolin.
Good afternoon, Alyssa.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is Alyssa Margolin. I serve as Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We're a statewide coalition of 80 organizations united around affordable housing policy. We're expressing our strong, enthusiastic support for Part 3 of Senate Bill 127. I do want to take this opportunity to thank many members of this committee and the prime sponsor of this section of the bill for their leadership on the affordable housing issue. You have helped move the needle, not only to help start with some initial investments into our State Housing Trust Fund this last biennium, but also raise the profile of the crisis itself. And as has been noted, we estimate we lack 20,000 units. So we have this unquestionable need for our state to take action and do more to encourage the development of more affordable housing options for New Hampshire residents. I thought I would limit my testimony to why I think it's important to make this investment in today's context. As has been noted, we need to compete within this New England economy for workforce. All of our neighboring states have made major investments in their state housing trust funds. In addition, New Hampshire is experiencing a very strong housing market. So our current robust housing market has generated strong real estate transfer tax revenue for the state, but at the same time has narrowed the affordable housing options for its residents. So I believe there's a strong argument that as a matter of public policy, we need to reinvest some of that revenue into more affordable housing production. I'd also like to touch on the federal landscape. To date, the relief packages have focused on the rental assistance side. And for those who are experiencing economic hardship from the pandemic, there has also been an eviction moratorium imposed by the CDC that's in play till at least the end of March. But the federal resources that can be used for the production have largely remained the same. And in order for our state to work better with the federal housing tax program, we'll need to actively encourage more affordable housing production to get the attention of those investors and to move that private capital into affordable housing development. And finally, I'll conclude with just noting the strong track record of New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. As an advocate on behalf of those who build, support, and manage affordable housing properties, they have proven our state housing finance agency to have the best data to identify the most important needs around our state. And they are able and have demonstrated an ability to successfully leverage every public dollar to bring in more federal and private capital into housing development. I've also been asked to share the support of the New Hampshire Planners Association with the committee this afternoon. I'll conclude by saying we urge your support for Part 3 and SB 127. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a good afternoon.
Next will be Will Stewart.
Afternoon, Will.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Will Stewart. I am the Executive Director of Stay Work Play New Hampshire, and we're a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to attract and retain more young people here in the Granite State. I'm here today to speak in favor of Part 3 of Senate Bill 127 with regard to funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Attracting and retaining more young people is critical to the future of our state. New Hampshire is as you may know, the second oldest state in the country with one of the lowest unemployment rates. On top of this, we're the #1 exporter of high school graduates seeking a 4-year degree, with some 62% of these young people leaving the state every year. Some eventually come back, but many don't. In short, New Hampshire needs all the people we can get in general and all the young people we can get in particular. Our businesses need workers and customers. Our towns need volunteer board members. Our nonprofits, churches, civics clubs, all need volunteers to accomplish their vital missions, without which our communities just can't function. So about 3 years ago, Stay Work Play commissioned a survey to collect data on why young people stay in New Hampshire and why they might leave. And the number one reason we found that young people might leave is that they just can't afford to live here, that our housing, both on the rental and the homeownership side, is just too expensive for them. And we heard this again and again all over the state last fall and winter as we talked to young people in 9 locations across New Hampshire as part of our Policy and Pints series. So, New Hampshire, housing here is expensive for just about everybody, but it's especially expensive for young people who, by being early on in their careers, are just making less money than their more experienced counterparts. Young people also face the additional burden of student loan debt. Indeed, New Hampshire has one of the highest average student debt loads in the country. And when you're paying hundreds of dollars in student loan payments every month, it just makes it that much harder to afford housing that's already expensive. At Stay Work Play, we see Part 3 of SB 127, which is seeking to recapitalize the Affordable Housing Fund as a key way to help make possible more affordable housing developments across the state. So thank you for your consideration of Stay Work Play's thoughts on this and your support of Senate Bill 127, Part 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Have a good afternoon.
Yep.
Next will be Mike Apfelberg.
Good afternoon, Mike.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me today. I'd like to speak on behalf of SB 127 Part 3 and speak in favor. I'm the president of the United Way of Greater Nashua. I'd like to offer you a little bit of a Nashua-centric perspective, as you've heard from other regions of the state as well. So they say that the rental vacancy rate in Nashua is about 0.5% or less. And what does that translate into? As of today, there are precisely 33 apartments for rent in the city of Nashua listed on Zillow. 33 apartments for rent in the entire city of Nashua rent on Zillow. The least expensive of those is listed at $1,250 a month. So I'd like to give you an idea of what that actually means. In order to afford this and only have 30% of your income go to rent, you have to earn about $24 an hour. That would translate into an income of $49,920 a year. The average median income, however, in Nashua for the year 2019 was $36,000 or $17.35 an hour. I think you can see the conundrum. We simply don't earn enough money to pay for the housing that's available in our community. In other words, a person earning the average wage in Nashua to rent the cheapest apartment available in the city absolutely must go on some sort of welfare supports or receive other subsidies or cut corners like foregoing utility payments or childcare or healthcare. As communities, we invest in welfare supports, homeless shelters, transitional housing programs, and other types of financial subsidies. Of course, this is necessary, and in some cases, I would say it's unfortunately necessary. At United Way, we currently support at least 20 of these programs through our community safety net, and we will continue to do so. However, at the heart of the matter is a very simple truth. We need additional and substantial quantities of affordable housing. Without such housing, we will not be able to support a working class population, which works in many of our service industries, including restaurants and retail. These are in turn the heart and soul of any downtown community. In order to have a vibrant downtown, you need to have an ample supply of housing, which is affordable to those who work in or around the downtown area. So therefore, we strongly endorse the proposed $5 million of investment into the Affordable Housing Fund made available through SB 127 Part 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony, Mike.
Thank you.
Next will be Martha Stone.
And unmute Martha.
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I know you've had a lengthy list of folks already, so I will try to be brief. I am Martha Stone. I'm the Executive Director of Crossroads House. We are one of the state's largest emergency shelter providers. Tonight, we'll be providing emergency shelter for 76 men, women, and children in our community. Pre-COVID, we would typically be over our normal capacity 100% of nights between October and May. The demand for emergency shelter remains high, and certainly it's been exacerbated by the situation with the pandemic, and the emergency shelters have to space people out and cannot accommodate the numbers that we normally do. I wanted to add my voice to speak in favor of Senate Bill 127, Part 3. This additional funding for affordable housing is desperately needed. I can share with you that, as others have mentioned, I won't go into great detail, but people who have an opportunity to rent an apartment using a housing choice voucher are often very challenged to find something within the right price range that is available and to find a landlord who will accept that. And that's one of our greatest tools. And yet there are times where the people we serve are not able to utilize those because they simply cannot find a vacant unit. One of the greatest indicators that I have noticed, I've been with Crossroads House for more than 17 years, so I have a bit of a track record in seeing some of these trends. And I can tell you that over the past 6 years, the length of time that people stay at our shelter, what we call our length of stay, has increased 69%. So it's gone from an average length of stay of 61 days to 103 days. And so that's not a statistic we're proud of. Our goal is to have people stay in a homeless shelter be as short as possible with the most positive outcome of moving to permanent housing. So as others have mentioned, we feel like this is the lack of affordable housing is one of the greatest obstacles in our way in our ability to help people have a relatively short stint in a homeless shelter and be able to transition out to permanent housing. Any addition to this fund would greatly increase the ability for others who are in the mode of, in the business of creating affordable housing. And as Ellen Grow mentioned, even small homeless shelter and service providers like ourselves have dipped our toe into the development world of adding our own housing stock, which Crossroads did a couple years ago, buying a property that would provide 12 units of affordable housing near our shelter for people exiting our shelter or others. So I will stop there and just say that I really appreciate you taking the time to hear our testimony, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Martha. Any questions from the committee? Well, thank you for your testimony and thank you for what you're doing.
Great, thank you.
If anybody else would like to speak on Part 3 of the bill, please raise your hand now. And I'm not seeing any more hands for Part 3. Oh, I am seeing one hand. Oh, nope, they took it away. I do have one hand raised. It looks, you can keep raising it and putting it back down. Okay. For Part 4, you can please raise your hand if you'd like to speak on Part 4 of the bill now. And okay, I am seeing a hand here. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Brian Hawkins, for the record, here representing NEA New Hampshire. We represent 17,000 educators across the state in collective bargaining, and here to testify in support of Part 4 of the bill around air quality. This is an issue that's actually been a concern for our members pre-pandemic and post, and while we're in the pandemic. I think most of the reasons around related to the pandemic are probably pretty obvious. Obviously, we have an airborne pathogen that is easily transmitted through the air, and school districts have been doing everything from replacing their HVAC systems to, attempting to use patchwork to try and make them safe, HEPA filters and opening windows when it's warm enough to do that, all to try and mitigate the transmission of the virus. And there is guidance around how to do this, both from the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, the ASHRAE standards for schools that many of our locals have worked with school districts to do things like inspections, commission inspections, and on how their air filtration systems are working. The New Hampshire Department of Education has also made recommendations to school districts based off of CDC recommendations that include everything from airflow to reducing negative pressure in high-risk areas like the school nurse's office, for example, where you have an increased risk of virus transmission. So a variety of issues which we're happy to share more with the committee on, but I figured given the time, I'll just summarize that part. The second piece of what I wanted to say was, this is really an opportunity for us to support school districts to come out of the pandemic in a stronger situation than we went in. As I said, our members have been concerned about the issue of air quality in schools for quite some time. As you know, we have a lot of old and aging school buildings, which presents its own health issues. But also, a lot of our schools were not designed to maximize air circulation. We've been hardening our schools for other safety reasons. And, we have a lot of schools which are cinder block structures, and they hold heat in them, which is not good from a learning perspective. It's also not good for heat and humidity perspective when we're talking about virus transmission. But before the pandemic, we had, and I think probably still now, there are some school security protocols which require buildings to be sealed. That retains the heat overnight. We in the long run, we have more schools that are at capacity, and they don't have necessarily effective climate controls for cold and winter. The temperatures in some districts, one of our members who testified on a similar bill, although it didn't have money attached to it in the House, referenced some of the temperatures that she experienced in her school district that could be quite dangerous, and some of those have physical impacts on students. What they observed in their district over the course of a single week at observing at the start of the school year, an increase in fatigue, triggering of asthma, and then other physical activities, dizziness, nausea, dehydration, and for the learning of our students, a decrease in cognitive issues, decrease in focus, decline in comprehension, and then also emotional ones, increased anxiety. She referenced also an issue around hygiene for some students. When you have a really warm building, we can all probably remember junior high and high school was an awkward time as it is. If you have a really hot school building, that doesn't help. There are some other ancillary issues that creates, increased visits to health offices, and we also really need to start our school year later in the year to accommodate for some of the temperature issues. A couple of quick other points, and then I'll conclude. There are some real horrifying stories I've heard from some school districts. For example, one school district was required to, again, this is pre-pandemic, shut down an entire wing due to bat feces that were in the school district. It was so toxic they had to throw away most of the things in that wing just due to the odor. So recent another school district where we had what was considered a chemical spill in one school that may or may not have emanated from the air conditioning unit. So there are all kinds of these air quality issues that existed, as I said, before the pandemic and after the pandemic. There was a 2017 study at the Harvard School of Public Health that stated that the importance of the school building, the quality and characteristics of our schools have an outsized impact on the health of our students. And by the time a student graduates from high school, he or she has spent 15,600 hours inside a school, only second to their home. And the time spent in the school is, we know is a time of rapid physical growth, hormonal changes, intense learning, and critical neurological and social development. And unfortunately, many of the aspects of the health and performance of our students can be negatively affected by chronic exposures to common environmental factors, the virus not even included in school buildings, including indoor air pollution, mold, pests, pesticides, radon, and the list goes on. This, I think, is a provision that's badly needed for the immediate needs right now. But going forward, I think this would be an important thing to include to support districts in fixing some of these critical problems that are not going to go away even after we are done with the coronavirus, which will hopefully be soon. I'll conclude my testimony there and happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And if anybody else would like to speak on part 4 at this time, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any more hands for part 4.
We'll go on to part 5.
If you'd like to speak on part 5, please raise your hand now. And I'm not seeing any hands for part 5.
Part 6.
If you'd like to speak on part 6, please raise your hand now. Not seeing any hands for part 6.
Part 7.
If you'd like to speak on part 7, please raise your hand. Okay, and we do have a hand for part 7. Becky Benvenuti.
Welcome back, Becky.
Hi, sorry to raise my hand. I know it's getting late. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I wanted to speak in support of Part 7 of SB 127, providing $500,000 in state aid grants for fiscal years 2022 and 23. As DES noted in their fiscal note, using these monies to pay back annual loan amortization amounts could generate a very positive environmental impact from a significant number of water system improvement projects. What RSA 4086A does is provide an incentive and creates affordability for municipal and community water systems, including planning and constructing systems that partner with other systems to increase their capacity, mitigate water supply emergencies, and provide high quality clean water for the residents. While consolidating connecting is strongly advised and encouraged by state and federal agencies, forging these partnerships can be extremely difficult for municipalities without direct assistance from the state. And RSA 486A, as you know, uses the words shall be eligible, the state shall pay. However, there's been a moratorium on eligible new projects since 2008. And although in 2013, the program did receive some funding, and Governor An executive council improved drinking water projects retroactive back until 2007. But since then, the program has remained unfunded while there are currently more than 15 eligible drinking water interconnection projects awaiting grant approvals. These state monies provide a benefit to all New Hampshire residents, not just to those who are hooked up to public water systems, because it provides clean drinking water consolidation to address source water contamination issues, fire suppression, redundant source distribution to many public water systems. And these achieve lower statewide health risk and cost to the general population that is drinking this water from both private and public water systems. The annual principal and interest payments by the state to help construct these projects is far less than the amount of money that will come back into the state through the general fund from the enhancement of economic development and expansion of affordable housing that's been talked about earlier today, that will be enabled by the quality and quantities of these water interconnection projects. Just yesterday, this committee heard testimony about the critical need for additional meals and rooms tax revenue. North Conway area is a great example of how monies invested in these public water supply projects have directly impacted the ability to improve economic development, including the vital tourism industry in that area. And this investment has returned many times over state general fund revenues from just the meals and rooms tax alone. Finally, the funding of this state aid grant program will allow municipalities to construct these projects now while the interest rates are low and before costs increase more. This bill will help meet both local and state goals. Please vote ought to pass on HB 412. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Becky. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Next is Boyd Smith.
Good afternoon, Boyd.
Hey, good afternoon, Chairman Daniels. This is Boyd Smith with the New Hampshire Water Works Association. I'm the executive director. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Becky, really hit it out of the park and gave you a lot of detail, much of which I suspect you folks are familiar with, even more so than myself. I've only been in this chair for about a year. But we supplied written testimony, and I just want to reinforce that our association believes this legislation ought to pass for some of the reasons that you've heard. It's existing statute. For some reason, it's been a moratorium on the funding until recently for wastewater. Our association represents public water providers, and those folks supply roughly 550,000 residents in the state of New Hampshire, so about a little under half the population. As you guys know, if you turn on the tap and don't get water, you have a problem. We've got aging infrastructure, and I was thinking back, something we haven't heard yet. There was a study done, commissioned by DES, I think it was 2010, might have been, well, it was around 2010, projecting roughly $2 billion in infrastructure needs for drinking water and wastewater treatment in the state over the next 20 years. And that report was generated 10 years ago. We're falling way behind on maintaining public infrastructure, clean water and wastewater. I must admit, when I signed up for this, I didn't realize how an omnibus worked, and that there's parts, I gather part 8 is probably the wastewater side of this, but maybe I'm wrong. We're basically in support of the state aid grant funding and advocate to ramp that up big time on the drinking water side. I know it's just a placeholder amount right now, I think $500,000, while the wastewater side is trying to catch up on some programs that are underway. Anyway, infrastructure funding is critical. The state partnership makes it possible for any number of small communities across the state to invest in a vital service that's been underinvested in for far too long. Anything that we can do as an association to support this position and help this committee make its case, we will absolutely do. We testified for HB 398 and 412 this morning, which are sort of companion bills to the Senate legislation, as I understand it. But it really is an investment, whether you're talking health or economy, quality of life, any way you measure it. Again, just imagine what happens if your water system fails. And I think we know that all too well. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for accepting our testimony. I believe you've got letters from other associations, so you have a pretty good cross-section of, Becky's group and the wastewater folks with water pollution control in Granite State. I don't know if they're on the phone, but I know we worked in coordination to provide varying perspectives in support of this legislation. So again, thank you very much for your time. Questions now or anytime that we can help, please let me know.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Boyd.
Next is William Hounsell.
Good afternoon. Mr. Hounsell, can you hear us? Mr. Hounsell? Kirsten, can you lower his hand?
Yes. All right, yeah, he's unmuted, so. If there's anyone else who'd like to speak on part 7 at this time.
Yeah, we'll say, Mr. Hounsell, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Not seeing any other hands.
Okay, we'll go on to part 8.
If anybody would like to speak on part 8. Great. And we have Becky Ben-Uvudi again.
One more time, Becky.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and I will be very brief. I want to present testimony on behalf of NHMA in support of the wastewater environmental grant program. And I would like to also thank Senator Bradley for sponsoring this bill as well. But this bill in particular would provide $5.7 million for fiscal year 2022, $6.9 million for 2023 to provide initial grant funding for 11 wastewater treatment projects that were originally slated to receive state aid grant funding in the current biennium, but have been held back from funding this year due to the pandemic budget impacts that the state has realized. Plus, that would provide initial funding for 110 new wastewater projects, which have been identified by the Department of Environmental Services as projects which should be complete and eligible for grant funding over the next biennium. As the previous bill, RSA 486 states, the state shall pay annually 20% of the annual amortization charges of eligible costs. Municipalities relying on this statute proceed with wastewater projects, and as required, they finance the full cost of the project up front, complete the construction, and then they are able to apply for payment of the state share, which is 20 to 30% of the eligible project costs, usually paid over a 25 to 30-year amortization period. Funding was appropriated, very thankfully, in the current budget for a backlog of 70 projects, which had been subject to moratoriums placed on projects since the 2008 recession. All 70 of those projects were substantially complete by December 2019, and all, except for the 11 previously discussed, which met the misfortune of the pandemic's impact, have been funded, at least in the first year of their amortization payments. Aid for water pollution control is based on 4 principles which were set forth in the original statute, and those are detailed in the written testimony which you have been provided. I will not repeat any of those, but just to say that it's really important that those original principles still apply today in terms of funding this important state and local partnership, and will continue to apply well into the future. Also, to assist you in understanding the trends of the state aid grant funding, I have attached a graph to my testimony, which shows the 21-year history of funding for these wastewater projects. SB 127 Part 8 is a step toward continuing and ensuring that this critical public health measure that impacts all New Hampshire residents can be financially supported. Again, thank you so much for your time, and we urge you to vote in favor of this SB 127.
Thank you, and thank you for your written testimony. Any
You're very
questions?
welcome.
Seeing none. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Next, we have Michael Carl.
Afternoon, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of Part 8 of the Senate Bill 127. As Becky had mentioned, I'm going to, she mentioned all the major points and I won't reiterate any of them. I'd just like to say that I represent the New Hampshire Water Pollution Control Association, and our over 300 members represent all of the 73 publicly owned wastewater treatment plants. And that investing in wastewater infrastructure is essential to our ability to treat the wastewater so it could be returned into the environment. Many of our treatment plants rely on the state aid grant program for the essential repairs and upgrades needed to do our jobs. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Michael.
Anybody else would like to speak on Part 8 at this time? Please raise your hand now. And I'm not seeing any more hands raised.
Okay, with that, I'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 127. And I'd like to go into executive session to do two bills, which shouldn't take too long. Moved by
Second.
Moved by Senator D'Alessandro, seconded by Senator Hennessy. We will call roll. Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator Morse,
Yes.
Senator Gaida,
Yes.
Senator Reagan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. We'll be in executive session. First bill I'd like to bring up is Senate Bill 135.
Senator,
Yes.
can you let me know what the other bill is so I can grab it?
77.
Got it. Thank you.
I'll move on to pass on 135.
Okay.
Second.
Senator Morse moves ought to pass on Senate Bill 135, seconded by Senator Hennessy. Any discussion?
Well, I'd just like to say that it was my intention to get this piece over to the House right away, because the question I asked earlier of the department, this was a true and up for every community in the state of New Hampshire. That's what Aaron worked on. And I think that part of the debate, everybody supports, and it should go over to the House and get approval over there while towns are debating. I'm not sure it's going to catch up to the actual law of the fact of where the towns stand, but we can probably fix that at some point in time to allow them to spend this money. But the reality is they should know it's coming. And that's why I thought this bill should get over right away. With as soon as we're going to hear this on the floor is the 18th. So, but anyhow, that's why I support it.
Thank you. Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support the bill because we have to do it. But there was a companion piece of legislation that Senator Khan spoke about. And I just wonder why we haven't seen that piece of legislation. Where is that? I thought that was fast track.
All 17 bills went out today, Lou. There's 3 bills that Senator Khan had in total on education. Those are all new ideas. Those need to go to the Committee on Education before they come to us. Those are all going to be things that, quite frankly, as we get to the budget phase, we're going to start to make decisions on all of those. But I don't see that they meet what this is trying to do, because this is common sense that this should have never happened. But I understand that the department needs this from us in order to focus the law on where it should be focused. But they're all those bills, every bill is out today. Josh is beating somebody right now to make sure that the last one got out, so.
Well, thank you, if I might. Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate that statement. As I said, I'm going to support the bill because I know the need. I've been to my local community, and they've already had the school district meeting. I just say that if Khan's bill is going to go to education before it comes to us, that's the decision that's made. So I'll accept that. But eventually, Khan's bill is going to have to come here, I believe, isn't he? Second committee.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, that's how almost every bill has functioned in the Senate, is they've gone to a policy committee. I sent this here direct because I wanted to get it over to the House, especially considering their first session isn't until the 24th or the 25th. You know, there were certain bills. There was one Senator Birdsall did, there's this one that I believe needed to go through the process fairly quick and get going. There's a lot of bills here today, Lou, that quite honestly, I don't know how, because they're in stacks like omnibus, I don't know how we're going to do what the Senate normally does with a budget, because you don't want to see some of these bills get killed when they go over to the Senate because they're in an omnibus bill.
Right.
And we certainly want to see some of these work their way into a budget phase, because that, quite frankly, even if you're Senator Khan, probably your worst nightmare last time you built a budget, a lot of these went into that budget. So I think there's a lot to think about. We're going to have to talk as a committee, obviously, but I just think that this bill on education is different. So.
Well, I appreciate the comment. I support it, and I think your rationale is good rationale. But indeed, a lot of these things are budget items that we looked at today, and if we followed our old principle, we pass them, put them on the table, and then talk about them, in the budget. If that's going to be our plan, I think that's what we've done in the past. I hope we'll be consistent.
I don't want to speak for Gary, but I just, no one knows what's going to happen with business taxes in March and April. I mean, and I think that's the crystal ball. The governor's going to come out with a budget on Thursday. I'm sure that works to the situation we're in right now. But the reality is, by the end of April, we should have a very good picture. I think the world's going to be a lot better. So that's just me being optimistic.
Yes. Thank you. My memory of when we had the select committee on bills was that Senator Khan's education formula bill was one of the ones that was going to be fast tracked. I might be wrong about that, but that's how I'm remembering it. So it just not understanding why it's one of the last bills out and is being referred to two committees. But I support this bill. I'm a co-sponsor, I think. Just curious about that.
Yeah, we've been held up till we had one bill come in on Friday and we had 16 bills come in over the weekend. Some of those are because you guys opened up rules and added 5 bills or 6 bills, but we've put them out as fast as we've gotten them. So I don't think there's anything any different about what we're doing here. It's I didn't hear from rules that they planned on fast tracking any bill, quite honestly. So I didn't hear that. I mean, this was specifically my trying to solve a problem. So.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will call roll. We'll start with Senator Gaida.
Senator Gaida votes yes.
Senator Reagan.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Senator D'Alessandro votes yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes,
and the chair votes yes. The vote is 7-0. And Senator Hennessy, did you want to take this out?
Yes.
Consent?
No, can't do that.
No, you
That's
can't
right,
do
my
that.
mistake.
No.
Sorry.
No.
I'm trying,
get in
Chuck. I'm
trouble with
trying to help you.
Tammy again.
No.
Okay. Let's
See,
bring up-
Deb, what they're trying to do? And I kept my mouth shut. You see that, Deb? I was quiet. I was reserved. I didn't make a comment.
I'm just trying to help the schedule.
Guida, I don't know.
Okay, last one I wanted to bring up today was Senate Bill 77.
I move on to pass.
Second.
Okay, the motion by Senator D'Alessandro, seconded by Senator Gaida, that Senate Bill 77 be ought to pass. Discussion?
If I may.
Yes. Senator
Thank you,
Gaida.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah. My sheriff approached me. Apparently, these fees have not been increased in 12 years. And if we don't raise the fees for the users, those who are served process, then it falls back on the general taxation for the county. So I strongly support raising these. I would have liked to have put some kind of a trigger mechanism to trigger another look, but sunsetting the bill would not make a lot of sense, and we can't bind future legislatures. So at some point, the Sheriff's Association will probably have to come forward to do another look in the future when their costs increase.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? We'll call roll. The motion is ought to pass on Senate Bill 77. Senator Gaida,
Senator Gaida votes yes.
Senator Reagan,
Yes.
Senator Morse,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
yes,
and the chair votes yes. The vote is unanimous, 7-0. And Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes, I'll take it out.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Consent, just trying.
Oh, come on, Gaida. Come on.
Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
So
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 moved.
move. Second. Third.
D'Alessandro and Senator Hennessy move to come out of executive session. Call roll. Senator Gaida,
Yes.
Senator Reagan,
Yes.
Senator Morse,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
yes.
And the chair votes yes. We will be out of executive session and look for a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Moved by Senator Gaida, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. We'll call roll. Senator Gaida,
Yes.
Senator Reagan,
Yes.
Senator Morse,
Yes.
Senator Hennessy,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, and motion carries unanimously. Thank you all, folks, for turned out to be somewhat of a long day.
It was a long day,
You.
but I found out that Hennessy wasn't born when I sponsored the school feeding and nutrition bill. Oh, boy. I probably delivered the formula for you.
Don't age me.
Great seeing you, Deb.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Good job,
Deb.
Gary.